Chapter 2439. Su Yu's heart trembled. He wasn't trying to save the heartless Iron Hunter. The resurrection technique could only be used once a day, and he had already used it. Now, he was only using his life force to restore his body. However, it was completely useless. His heart sank, and he pointed a finger at the heartless Iron Catcher's forehead. Time reversal. The laws of time and space simultaneously flowed in reverse, restoring the heartless Iron Arrester's body to the moment before it was reduced to a skeleton. However, what shocked Su Yu was that it was still ineffective. Is it because of the Forbidden Forest? Su Yu asked. The Forbidden Forest was formed from the remnant fluctuations of the ancient Great War. It was not impossible for it to interfere with the 8 great laws. You think too much. The Patriarch of Heaven-Splitting said hoarsely. The reason why your laws can't work on her is because of her. Her? So you suddenly realized something. His eyes darkened, and he said in a low voice, Is it because she is a descendant of the ancient god? You're worth teaching, Patriarch Sky-Splitting said. It was true. He had long since sensed that the more powerful a living being was, the more difficult it would be to bring it back to life. Her laws were useless against the heartless Iron Hunter, so there was only one possibility. She was a descendant of the ancient god. Su Yu's heart sank completely. The successor of the ancient god, just this identity alone was enough to cut off any possibility of survival. You can't save a person, but as I said, death is never the end of life. Life can be reborn in another way. Heaven-Splitting Patriarch said meaningfully, If you persevere, one day, we will meet again. His words were filled with mysteriousness, causing others to be unable to fathom his intentions. I've always been a man of my word. Since you found the heavenly throne of heaven and earth in that bead, it belongs to you. The Patriarch crooked his finger, and the golden-black tortoise flew into his palm. As for the inheritance of ancient god Jin Xian, it belongs to me. The golden-black tortoise fell into Patriarch Heaven-Splitter's hands without any resistance. Casting a glance at Su Yu, the Heaven-Splitting ancestor said placidly, Hurry up and complete your 8 great laws. Otherwise, the group of people outside the Forbidden Forest will be in danger, including the woman of the ancient god, Jiuyo's successor. Ancient god Nine Nether? Su Yu was slightly bewildered, and his heart shook violently. Was he talking about Qin Sienna? That strange little phoenix that was similar to the golden-black tortoise. Could it be the inheritance of an ancient god? He was both surprised and worried. To his surprise, Sienna was still alive. What he was worried about was that evil Sanrin was the biggest threat, just as Patriarch Sky-Splitting had said. He declared that he would unify the outer realms and use this to resist the calamity of the world. What he was going to do next would definitely threaten Qin Sienna and the entire outer realm. Thank you, Senior. After understanding that the heaven-splitting ancestor was not a cannibal like he had described, and that he had no malicious intent, Su Yu bowed gratefully and immediately stared at the great divine throne of heaven and earth. After so many years, the great divine throne of heaven and earth had already recovered. However, fear of Su Yu still lingered in its heart. In the past, it had almost been torn apart by Su Yu because it had refused to submit to him. Being stared at by Su Yu, the great divine throne of heaven and earth and the seal shivered, evoking the painful memory of being beaten by Su Yu to the point of almost collapsing. Looks like you still remember me. Su Yu tore off the seal with one hand and said coldly, Cooperate with me and become a Pathmaster. Otherwise, I will destroy you completely. As if he could understand Su Yu's words, the divine throne of heaven and earth remained motionless, not daring to resist at all. Su Yu's eyes were cold as he jumped up and sat down cross-legged. Within the great divine throne, a vast divine light shot up into the sky and engulfed Su Yu. His mind was suddenly empty, and the 7 great principles, other than the space principle, kept circling in his mind. The dragon of time, the dragon of space, the dragon of soul. The 7 little dragons formed by the 7 principles wandered within the divine light, absorbing it constantly. As Suyu's comprehension continued to improve, the dragons of the principles changed one after another. Their bodies gradually expanded and became transparent. When they swelled to an extreme point, they exploded like fireworks and scattered across the sky, forming a dynamic picture. The first to explode was the Dragon of Time. An ancient hourglass stood upside down between the heavens and the earth. Inside the hourglass, fine water droplets dripped down slowly and steadily like sand. Time freeze. Suyu pressed his palm against the hourglass. The water droplets stopped dripping, and an invisible aura, with the hourglass as the center, enveloped infinitely in all directions. Everywhere it passed, time was frozen. The figure of the heaven-splitting ancestor, who was sitting cross-legged and studying the golden Xuanwu, paused for 3 breaths before he could barely break free from the influence of the hourglass. He looked up in surprise and exclaimed, "I haven't seen the time domain in a long time. The last time I encountered it was when that little girl just came of age." Suyu ignored him, closed his eyes, and continued the domain of the second principle. The desire for revenge in his heart burned like a raging flame that could destroy the world. Mo Qingdao's death and Qin Xian'er's unknown fate were all thanks to the Xie Sanren. Xie Sanren, just you wait. Suyu sat steadily on the divine throne of heaven and earth, closing his eyes. Occasionally, his eyes would crack open, revealing a cold light. At that time, the Xie Sanren escaped from the forbidden forest, extremely unwilling. The divine nine-dragon Cauldron missed. The Xie Sanren's heart was filled with resentment. The sudden appearance of the soaring snake and the octopus Holy Spirit King. If not for them, the divine nine-dragon Cauldron would have been in his hands. However, the current him was still no match for the 2 Holy Spirit Kings. Barging into the forbidden forest again would only be courting death. Forget it. It won't be too late to barge into the forbidden forest to get it back after I'm done with that matter. The Xie Sanren looked up and saw many pairs of shocked eyes. The strongest almighties of the north, south, east, and west regions were all here. The north region's demon Jin Gang, the south region's green and white dragons, the west region's South Pole immortal Wang and divine flaming demonic woman, and the east region's divine mansion. An evil smile bloomed on the corner of the Xie Sanren's mouth. "You're all here. That saves me a lot of trouble." As he spoke, he blew out a breath of air toward the crowd. This breath of air contained profound energy that surpassed the outer realm, and it transformed into a myriad of talismans that emanated a dense, evil aura. The strong men of the 4 regions realized that something was wrong. They scattered like birds and beasts, shouting angrily, "Xie Sanren, what are you trying to do?" Everyone was shocked by the unparalleled power displayed by the Xie Sanren. The well-hidden Xie Sanren had broken through to the level of the mysterious Path Master without anyone noticing. As they fled, a group of people led by the Demon Jin Gang tried to resist the incoming talismans. However, the power of the talismans was shocking. They completely ignored their resistance and forcefully entered their bodies. The moment the talismans entered their bodies, whether it was the Demon Jin Gang, the Azure and White Dragons, or any other living beings, their bodies immediately stiffened, and their consciousness quickly dissipated. How similar was this to the half-life puppet? In the pavilion in the sky, the gray-robed elder holding the sword was furious. "How dare you, Xie Sanren, disturb an 8-star civilization?" The power of the mysterious path in his body surged. He was also a mysterious path master powerhouse. The Xie Sanren chuckled coldly and took out a token. "Old man, I advise you to mind your own business. There are some things that you can't meddle in." Seeing this token, the anger on the gray-robed elder's face disappeared. It was replaced by shock and fear. After staring at the token for a while, the gray-robed elder took out the ancient sword and returned to the whirlpool with the pavilion. They left the outer realm and returned to the 8-star civilization. The recruitment of 8-star civilizations that happened once every 100 years ended, just like that, because of a token. Chapter 2440. After chasing away the 8-star civilization's recruitment envoy, the evil Sanren's eyes shone with an evil light. It's finally quiet. He took a deep breath and looked in the direction of the East Divine Palace. Evil Venerable Cemetery, come. The body that belonged to selfless being released runes from the Shindao Palace. Strands of blood shot out from the runes and shot into the distance. A moment later, the world rumbled and the sky cracked. It was as if a giant beast was stepping over the stars. The boundless emptiness surged and stirred up waves that filled the sky. It was a shocking sight. When Xiao Chan looked up, he saw a huge mausoleum with many tombs flying over. That was the evil, venerable cemetery. Strands of blood threads pulled the evil, reverend cemetery from a faraway place with a loud rumble. Those runes were things that the Xiandao Palace had imprinted on selfless being's body to control the evil, venerable cemetery. However, the evil Sanrin had used it and pulled the evil, venerable cemetery from the depths of the East Divine Palace to this place. Looking at the cemetery, the evil Sanrin's eyes were filled with excitement. This day has finally come. With a wave of his sleeves, the blood threads burrowed into the ancient tombs of the ancient almighties. The ancient tombs of the evil, venerable cemetery were filled with powerful beings that even the heavens and earth couldn't bury. Their remains all had wills in the evil, venerable cemetery, and they wanted to break out of the cemetery at any time. However, because every tomb was sealed, they couldn't escape, and outsiders couldn't open the tombs either. However, the blood threads ignored the seals and restrictions and entered the tombs. Apart from the tombs of the ancient gods in the center, which had extremely powerful restrictions that prevented them from entering, most of the other tombs were invaded by the blood threads. "Come out," the evil Sanrin shouted, and a large number of remnant souls were dragged out of the tombs by the blood threads. Those were the remnant souls of the ancient powerful beings, and they contained part of their memories. Enter. Under the evil Sanrin's control, the remnant souls flew into the bodies of the living beings controlled by the runes. They had already lost their sense of self, and their consciousness was immediately replaced by the consciousness of the ancient powerful beings. They quickly became half-living puppets. With time, the tens of thousands of powerful beings would all become puppets of the great venerable realm. After so many years, I've finally taken the first step. The evil man could not hide his excitement. With his previous strength, it was impossible for him to create so many semi-living puppets in a short period of time. But now, after obtaining the body of the person without self, he was almost omnipotent. Once the puppet matures, I can set up the heavenly 9 calamities formation to resist the destruction of the era in 70 years. The evil Sanrin was overwhelmed with emotions. However, things did not go as he wished. A series of popping sounds could be heard. Sanrin looked over and his face darkened. Many experts with lower cultivation bases were unable to withstand the fusion of remnant souls and died on the spot. Among them, the Western region was the best. Many of the younger generation perished on the spot, including the greedy Wolf King who had lost his Tao Pearl of Fate. It was a pity that he had rushed here from thousands of miles away, but he didn't even have the chance to meet the heroes of the world before he lost his life. On the other hand, Xiao Rukin, whose cultivation was almost the same, was able to withstand it. Although he looked like he was in pain, there were no signs of death. Sanrin roughly estimated that only 3/4 of the people in the 4 regions had survived. Moreover, many of them were not in good condition. Their HP was rapidly declining. Perhaps not even 10,000 of them could survive in the end. Useless trash. The evil Sanrin was very dissatisfied. A half-living puppet. Only a talented body can withstand it. He looked up at the Forbidden Forest. The most outstanding group of youths had already followed Su Yu into the Forbidden Forest. All of you go in and capture your own juniors. No mistakes. The evil Sanrin did not dare to go deeper into the Forbidden Forest. His cultivation base was too strong. Once he entered, he would immediately attract the attention of the 2 Holy Spirit Kings. On the other hand, the teacher's cultivation bases were neither too high nor too low, so it was safer. Immediately, demonic King Kong from the North region, the green and white dragons from the South region, and Guangming Jade from the West region obeyed the order and entered the Forbidden Forest. This included the divine, flame, demonic woman. The person she wanted to capture was none other than Su Yu. A dozen people entered the forbidden forest and quickly searched for their juniors. At the same time, Su Yu and the others, who did not know what had happened outside, were focused on searching for the holy spirits. Along the way, they found nothing, until they came to a gap in the shattered space. "There are traces of a battle here," Emo Wuhue said solemnly as he looked at the mess on the ground, as well as the remnants of evil energy. Su Yu's beautiful eyes turned as she jumped into an isolated space in front of her. Everything in this space was normal, except for some huge footprints on the ground. Just as Su Yu was about to confirm whether it was safe, her ears suddenly moved. She shouted coldly toward the edge of the space. "Who is it? Come out." Looking over, she saw a small palm covered in blood tightly grabbing onto a corner of the edge of the space, trying hard not to fall into it. Sensing that something was wrong, Su Yu immediately walked forward and looked down. She was surprised to find that it was a girl with a face as pale as a piece of paper. She had one hand on the edge of the space, and half of her body was trapped in the space turbulence. If her soft cry for help had not passed through the space turbulence with difficulty and reached Su Yu's ears, the latter might not have noticed it. "Are you the one from the West region?" Su Yu had a deep impression of the second person to enter the forbidden forest. After pondering for a moment, she reached out her hand and pulled the girl out of the space turbulence. "Thank you," the girl said gratefully, but her eyes never left the space crack. Her eyes were filled with anxiety, which could not be concealed. "Who fell into it?" Su Yu followed her gaze. When she saw the light ball, her eyes burned with pain, causing her to avert her gaze in shock. "Brother Su Yu." The girl pursed her lips and clenched her fists. She was naturally Qin Xiener. After the Holy Spirit King had swept her and the cauldron into this space, she had jumped out of the divine nine-dragon cauldron and stored it. Half of her body had jumped into the space crack. She had done this to protect Su Yu's divine nine-dragon cauldron from Xiesanren. However, she was not proficient in space, so she could not get out of the space crack. Fortunately, Su Yu had discovered her. Su Yu was shocked. Just looking at the ball of light was enough to cause extreme pain, let alone falling into it. No matter how powerful Su Yu was, he would still die. Thinking of this, Su Yu's mood became gloomy, and she sighed. "I had once regarded you as my only hope. What a pity." Emo Wuhue, the lonely king, and the others arrived one after another. Knowing that it was Su Yu who had fallen into the space crack, they all had mixed feelings. Some were gloating, some heaved sighs of relief, while others expressed deep regret. He had become the ruler of a region before the age of 150. Such a person had perished just like that. How could they not sigh? This is the end of the road. It seems like we have to find a new route to capture the Holy Spirit King, Emo Wuhue suggested. Everyone nodded in agreement. They represented the strongest people of the era outside the region. If they worked together, it would not be difficult for them to kill a Holy Spirit. However, who knew that just then, a group of boundless chi would sweep over like the autumn wind sweeping away the fallen leaves. Chapter 2441. A group of experts led by Emo Jingyang and the green and white dragons dashed toward them at high speed. Emo Wuhue saw Emo Jingyang at first glance and exclaimed in surprise, "Why is the demon lord here?" The lonely king was also surprised. "Guardians, why are you also?" As they spoke, they went up to greet them. "Don't go. Something is wrong with them." Sumiyu shouted coldly to wake them up. Emo Wuhue and the lonely king thought it was strange that the elders came to the forbidden forest together. After Sumiyu's reminder, they noticed that the elders' eyes were dull and their expressions were stiff. "Demon Master, can you hear what I'm saying?" Emo Wuhue's eyes turned slightly as he probed. However, Emo Jingyang did not say a word. His expression did not change at all as he continued to rush toward Emo Wuhue. Finally, his expression changed completely. "Run!" Emo Wuhue's heart sank. He turned around and ran away immediately. He didn't know what was going on. He only knew that the demon lord was up to no good. Even before his warning, Rain and the Lonely King had already realized that the situation was not good and escaped first. The rest of the Sky Prides were all quick-witted, and they all fled in different directions. Whoosh! A group of elders arrived with a strong wind, which made the whole world tremble. They kept a close eye on their juniors and captured them separately. Those with relatively weaker cultivations were soon captured by their elders. Only Su Muyu, Qin Xian'er, Imo Wuhui, and the Lonely King were able to get rid of the elders' pursuit temporarily. The one who was chasing Su Muyu was her teacher from the White Tiger group. Their cultivation was similar to Su Muyu's. They were all at the later stage of the celestial realm. Su Muyu could fight them one-on-one. However, there were too many of them. She could only run away. The one who was chasing Qin Xian'er was the South Pole Immortal One. If Qin Xian'er used the 9 Nether Phoenix's magical artifact, the South Pole Immortal One would definitely die. However, she was extremely weak at the moment. She could only run for her life. Qin Xian'er didn't know which direction to go. She ran into a closed and desperate place. Looking at the South Pole Immortal One, Qin Xian'er pursed her lips and tried to summon the little black phoenix with her last bit of energy. However, without Su Yu supporting her from the side, how could she fight for 10 precious breaths of time? While he was still in the process of summoning, the South Pole Immortal One arrived with a domineering aura. His domain instantly opened up, and a magnificent scene of danger slowly descended, enveloping Qin Xian'er within it. Qin Xian'er felt her body stiffen, unable to move, as if she had been embedded in a painting. The South Pole Immortal One walked over expressionlessly and grabbed Qin Xian'er's shoulder. He was about to bring her back to the evil Serene. Once that happened, Qin Xian'er would definitely die. The divine 9-dragon Cauldron would also fall into evil Serene's hands. Intrusive dream. However, right at that moment, the South Pole Immortal One's domain suddenly changed color. The place that was originally full of immortal chi turned into a hazy pink color in the blink of an eye. Domains were unique to Tao Lords. If one's domain was forcefully changed by the enemy, then there was only one possibility. The enemy's domain level was far above his own. South Pole Immortal One's domain was at the intermediate level, so this newcomer's domain was most likely at the advanced level. Once his domain changed, the South Pole Immortal One's eyes slowly closed in confusion. He stood on the spot and fell into a deep sleep. Without the support of the person himself, the celestial realm domain naturally dissipated. Qin Xian'er was saved because of that. "Thank you for saving my life," Qin Xian'er said gratefully as she bowed to the surroundings. The situation just now was clearly due to the help of an expert. Swish! A shadow descended. It was a woman with a light veil over her face. Her figure was as graceful as a dream, and her eyes were as cold as snow. At the same time, she seemed dreamy and unreal. "Who are you to sue you?" the snow-like woman asked softly. Her crystal-like eyes were constantly sizing Qin Xian'er up with curiosity. Qin Xian'er was curious. Could the woman in front of her be related to Su Yu? "I am Qin Xian'er blurted out. However, when the words were about to come out of her mouth, she silently swallowed them back. For the time being, we can be considered friends. She mocked herself in her heart. What right did she have to call herself brother Su Yu's wife? In this world, which wife would completely forget her husband? Friends? The snow-like woman's eyes were filled with doubt, but her expression was obviously much more relaxed. "What about you?" "A woman, I guess," the snow-like woman said calmly. Qin Xian'er was stunned. Brother Su Yu's woman? Her heart clenched as she worried about her gains and losses. Could she be brother Su Yu's new wife when I lost my memory? Thinking of this, she felt extremely uncomfortable. "You entered the Forbidden Forest before me. Did you manage to catch up with Su Yu?" the snow-like woman asked. Qin Xian'er's eyes dimmed. "Brother Su Yu is in danger, but I believe he is still alive." In response, the snow-like woman nodded in agreement. Yes, he is indeed not dead. Looking at the woman in front of her, who seemed to know Su Yu very well, Qin Xian'er felt even more uncomfortable. She kept thinking in her heart, Could it be that everything Brother Su Yu had said to her was just wishful thinking? She had clearly wanted to continue the crystallization between them. But why? Let's leave this place first. The snow-like woman looked around cautiously. On the way here, she had been chased by several holy spirits. With such a huge commotion here, they would definitely be attracted. The two of them left immediately. Not long after, several holy spirits chased after them. One of the holy spirits sniffed on the spot and looked excited. Then, it roared towards the sky. Before long, a fluorescent light appeared nearby without warning. The fluorescent light converged to form a giant python. Where is it? The giant python was the soaring snake. The Holy Spirit pointed at the ground. The soaring snake looked over and squinted its eyes. It is indeed the aura left on my body. That divine cauldron was here. Its eyes were filled with greed. Then, its eyes suddenly focused and looked in the direction where Qin Xianer had left. Do you think you can escape? The giant snake's body suddenly collapsed, turning into fluorescent light and dispersing. On the other side, Mo Wuhui and the Lonely King were racking their brains to escape. However, the difference in their cultivation levels was too great. In the end, they could not escape for long and were captured. At this point, besides Qin Xianer, the snow-like woman, and Su Muyu, the rest of the juniors had been captured. They would never have thought that what was supposed to be an 8-star civilization recruitment would end up becoming a battle between their juniors and their seniors. It had to be said that this was a great irony. After capturing them, the evil Sanrin was a little dissatisfied. Su Muyu, what a pity. Besides Su Yu, Su Muyu was the #1 heaven ruler in the whole area. Her body should have been able to withstand the powerful remnant souls of the ancient era. Evil Sanrin, why don't you let me do it? Suddenly, one of the people controlled by the talisman spoke up. The evil Sanrin looked over, his eyes reflecting Su Ming's figure. No wonder, it's you, the evil Sanrin said. Su Ming's body was surrounded by a faintly discernible golden ring. Under the contrast of the golden light, his childish face was exceptionally vicious. I knew that Su Muyu was not a good person, that Su Muyu was blind to side with him. He had betrayed them at the last minute and joined the Qilin group. In the end, not only did he not receive any benefits, he was severely punished and became a slave. During that time, Su Ming had been humiliated like never before in his life. Even the most inconspicuous student could step on his face and pee on his head. For the prideful Su Ming, this was an unforgettable hatred. He blamed all of this on Su Yu. Without Su Yu, he would not be in this situation. Now that Su Yu had entered the Forbidden Forest, he could not do anything to him. However, his friends might not be so unfortunate. Can you do it? The evil Sanrin asked Su Ming. Su Ming clenched his teeth. I can. I can prove it to you. The evil Sanrin squinted his eyes. Su Ming was a very special person. This was no secret to the higher-ups of the East Region Divine Palace. Back then, the evil Sanrin had extracted the remnant soul of an extremely powerful ancient being called Venerable Golden Light. He had inserted the remnant soul into Su Ming's body, preparing to refine him into a half-living puppet. However, something had happened midway, causing him to fail. There was still a remnant soul in Su Ming's body, but it had not taken over Su Ming's body, so it could not unleash the power of the remnant soul. Disappointed, the evil Sanrin had prepared to destroy Su Ming. However, he could not bear to destroy the remnant soul, so he had thrown it to the Green Dragon Group to be nurtured. Over the years, he had not made any progress. Now that he had suddenly stood up and declared that he wanted to go against Su Muyu, the evil Sanrin could not help but take him seriously. Oh, is that so? The evil Sanrin asked. Su Ming weaved seals with both hands. The seals were complicated and profound, extremely mysterious. This is... The evil Sanrin's eyes squinted even deeper. A hint of surprise appeared in his eyes. After finishing the seals, Su Ming's entire body turned golden. Intense golden light shone from his body, illuminating half of the galaxy. His temperament had changed greatly as well, and he seemed slightly unfathomable. The aura of a great venerable realm cultivator surged like waves. Moreover, That aura was still rising crazily. In just a few breaths, he had reached the late-stage, great venerable realm. Only then did his aura stop rising. The evil Sanrin revealed an evil smile. You've hidden it quite well. Turns out that you have already secretly learned to control venerable golden light's remnant soul. Now that he thought about it, his fusion back then had not failed. Normal half-living puppets were the original souls that the remnant soul had devoured. However, Su Ming was different. The original soul had devoured the remnant soul and controlled most of its power. It was just that he had been holding it in. Su Ming had a hint of hostility on his face. You flatter me, evil Sanrin. I only unearthed all my potential by accident when I was a slave. Before this, although he had hidden it, he had only hidden it up to the middle stage of the heaven tier. It was only when he had been bullied by others that his temperament changed. Only then did he completely control venerable golden light's essence and achieve his current achievements. All right, I'll leave it to you. If you succeed, I can bring you along for the great calamity that will happen in 70 years. Su Ming smiled savagely. I don't care about the great calamity. What I care about is who has bullied me. Wait for my good news. Su Ming leaped into the forbidden forest. Su Miyu had used all her strength to finally escape from the pursuit of the teachers. Chapter 2442. She was deep in a shattered space, using every second to recover her path master power. Looking at the scorching ball of light outside the space crack, her heart was extremely gloomy. Su Yu is dead, and there are changes in the outside world. Can't I take revenge? Su Miyu clenched her right fist, feeling hopeless. With C.S. Sanrin's cultivation, she would never be able to take revenge on her own. In her despair, the aura of several holy spirits approached her. The three irregularly shaped holy spirits noticed Rain's presence and rushed over with a roar. Su Miyu smiled bitterly in her heart. When it rains, it pours. It's too late to mend the leak. Do the heavens want me dead? She was already in a difficult situation, but a few holy spirits had come to send her into the abyss of despair when she was at her weakest. As the holy spirits approached, Su Miyu took out her doctrine artifact with a bitter smile, ready to fight. With the power of the holy spirits, she could at most resist them for a few breaths. Clenching her teeth, Su Miyu smiled bitterly, ready to die. Puff! Who knew that a series of shattering sounds would resound in his ears? As he focused his gaze, he discovered that the few holy spirits that were madly rushing over suddenly exploded, turning into fluorescent light and disappearing. Su Miyu was stunned. Ooh, to be able to destroy all the holy spirits in one night, it had to be someone at the pinnacle. Senior Su, have you forgotten about me so quickly? A teasing voice descended from the sky, accompanied by a sudden burst of golden light. Raising her head, Su Miyu's eyes reflected the image of Su Ming descending slowly with a golden hoop draped around him. Su Ming. Su Miyu was surprised and shocked. The aura emanating from Su Ming's body made her heart tremble. He was no longer at the celestial realm, but at the great venerable realm, which was far above her. She thought she was seeing things. In her memory, Su Ming was just a fish dragon realm master, right? How long had it been? And he had become a great venerable realm master. Unimaginable. Su Miyu's eyes were filled with vigilance, and she took a step back. Senior Su, I saved you. If I wanted to harm you, would I need to destroy the holy spirits? Su Ming sighed helplessly. The vigilance in Su Miyu's eyes eased a little. If he really wanted to harm him, he could have just stood by and watched. It was unnecessary for him to make a move. I'm sorry, it's just a habit, Rain said gratefully. Thank you, Junior Su, for saving me. We're all from the Eastern Region Divine Palace. It's only right that we help each other, Su Ming said modestly. Rain asked what happened outside. Why are our teachers and the experts from the other three domains being controlled? Speaking of this, Su Ming sighed. It's the evil Sanrin. I don't know what method he used to control all the experts. There was actually such a thing. There were so many experts in the outside world, but they were all controlled by evil Sanrin. Rain instinctively did not believe it, but the truth was right before her eyes. She bit her lips and felt bitter at her heart. Without Su Yu, He had no one to rely on, and the evil Sanrin controlled so many strong martial artists. There is no hope for revenge in this life. Senior sister, I plan to kill my way back and free the experts of the four regions. Su Ming said solemnly. The evil Sanrin is sinister. If he really succeeds, it will be a catastrophe for the entire outer realm. Upon hearing that, Rain was instantly tempted. Su Yu had indeed perished, but Su Ming was now at the later stage of the great venerable realm. If he was willing to deal with the evil Sanrin, his chances of success would be much higher than Su Yu's. Junior, if you really want to, I can tell you a weakness of the evil Sanrin. Rain's eyes instantly lit up. Please tell me. Rain's lips trembled as she transmitted the weakness to Su Ming. After hearing the news, Su Ming laughed. If that's the case, I am 100% confident. Really? Rain was overjoyed. She did not notice that Su Ming had unknowingly approached her during their conversation. Su Ming nodded. Yes. However, I have something else that I need to tell you. Please tell me. Rain's heart was filled with joy. She did not realize that something was amiss. That is, Su Ming suddenly let out an evil laugh. I lied to you. What? Rain immediately realized that something was amiss. She quickly retreated, trying to put some distance between them. However, Su Ming stood where he was and sneered calmly. You overestimate yourself. With a tap of his foot, a majestic aura pounced forward, slapping Rain, who was still in the air, onto the ground. Pooh! Rain, who was already injured, was heavily injured again. She was pressed onto the ground by the domineering aura, unable to move. What East Region Divine Palace is #1? That's all you got. Su Ming walked over with his hands behind his back. His childish face was filled with arrogance and arrogance. Rain was shocked and angry. She was just in a situation where she had found a capable assistant, but in the blink of an eye, she was on the brink of death. The change was so great that she felt as if she had fallen from the heavens into the underworld. Rain felt like she was in a dream. It was extremely surreal. Are you satisfied with this surprise? Su Ming's lips curled into a mocking smile. He wanted Rain to experience the feeling of falling from the clouds into the underworld. Su Ming was very satisfied with the feeling of revenge as he watched the once high and mighty East Region Divine Palace's #1 disciple being toyed with by him. Rain closed her eyes. She had already accepted her fate. Blessings never come in pairs. Misfortune never comes alone. It's good that you've accepted your fate. Su Ming picked her up and looked around. Actually, I've been in the Forbidden Forest for a while now. I've always wanted to find that human scum with the surname Su. It's a pity that he hid himself well. Rain did not speak. She sighed in her heart. Su Yu had already died in the Forbidden Forest. How could she find him? Thinking about it now, it might not have been a bad thing for Su Yu to die earlier. At least she would not have to endure Su Ming's humiliation before she died. If he was here, I would make his life a living hell. Su Ming's face was filled with malice. In the East region, the person he hated the most was Su Yu. It was a pity that he had no chance to take revenge. Let's go. Obediently become Xie Sanrin's puppet, Su Ming said coldly. He picked up Rain and was about to leave. Unexpectedly, at that moment, a pitch-black light suddenly shot in from outside the crack in space. It even covered up the dazzling ball of light. Su Ming let out a sound of surprise. He looked into the crack to investigate. A dark world of death filled with cries of agony and corpses came into view. Within the world, a deathly aura filled the sky. Skeletons were piled up. In the center of the world, there was a blood steel made of flesh and blood. There was only one word on the steel: death. One look at the word death caused Su Ming's entire body to tremble. He could vaguely feel that his life had almost been sucked away by the word death. What is that? Su Ming retreated in fear. Su Yu, who had also noticed the scene, felt her scalp go numb. The pitch-black world of death gave her a sense of extreme danger. However, she noticed a silver-haired human sitting cross-legged on the blood steel with the word death written on it. Su Yu? Su Yu could not believe her eyes. She cried out involuntarily. At that moment, the world of death revolved around Su Yu. Even the blood steel with the word death written on it was groveling beneath his feet. It was as if Su Yu was the master of death. What? Su Yu? Su Ming looked over, losing his voice in shock. Impossible. How could he possess such a world of death? It was as if their exclamations had awakened Su Yu. Su Yu slowly opened his left eye, but his right eye was tightly shut. His exposed left eye was unusual. It was pitch black, like the eye of a demon. Being stared at by that pitch-black eye, Su Ming and Su Yu both felt a chill run down their spines. An indescribable fear caused their hearts to beat wildly. Su Yu. Su Ming suppressed the uneasiness in his heart and scolded, "Do you dare to come up?" Su Yu calmly looked at Su Ming, not saying a word. However, the blood steel with the word death written on it suddenly shone brightly. Death gaze. Su Yu opened his pitch-black left eye, and the word death suddenly appeared. Just as the word appeared, Su Ming felt a sharp pain in his soul. His soul was pulled out of his body uncontrollably, flying toward the word death written on the blood steel. This is a high-level domain. How is this possible? How could you? Su Ming was scared out of his wits. The black world that Su Yu was in was not a real world. It was a domain of death. Moreover, it was a high-level domain of a terrifying level. Only a Xiandao master like Xie Sanren could withstand such a domain. Anyone weaker than a Xiandao master would undoubtedly die. Despite his fear, Su Ming struggled crazily. Imperishable golden light, open. 9 golden rings flew out of his body one after another, floating above his head and forcefully suppressing his soul, which was about to leave his body, back into his body. However, under the death gaze, the 9 golden rings were broken one by one. Su Ming's soul could not be held back any longer. It left his body and was pulled into the blood steel by the death gaze. Ah! With a miserable scream, Su Ming's soul disappeared into thin air, leaving nothing behind. In a fragment of space, Su Muyu's body was covered in cold sweat. Her heart was beating wildly, and her eyelids were trembling. The life of a late-stage, great venerable was taken away, just like that. He did not even have the chance to struggle. As she panicked, Su Yu closed his eyes once again. At the same time, he raised his finger and flicked it towards Su Ming's body. A soul had appeared in the body that had lost its soul, creating a soul out of thin air. This is the soul domain. Su Muyu sucked in a breath of cold air. She could not believe her eyes. Since ancient times, souls were born from the cycle of reincarnation. It was already extremely difficult for those powerful martial artists to keep their souls from being destroyed, let alone creating a soul. Tell Xie Sanren that he will die in 10 days. The death realm around Su Yu slowly disappeared, and his body returned to the dazzling light. Su Ming's body nodded. He took a step forward and left the forbidden forest, returning to the outside world. How was it? Seeing Su Ming return from afar, Xie Sanren asked. Su Ming did not say a word, but continued to approach. Only then did Xie Sanren realize that something was wrong. He looked at Su Ming and frowned. His soul has been destroyed? Just as he finished speaking, Su Ming suddenly self-destructed. How terrifying would the self-destruction of a late-stage, great venerable be? The heaven-destroying divine light affected thousands of stars. The Xie Sanren and the group of powerful martial artists who were nearby were not spared. Many of the enslaved puppets were turned into dust. Tens of thousands of meteorites were erased from the world. Chapter 2443. The power of a late-stage, great venerable's self-destruction was terrifying. Heaven and earth fell silent, as if all living beings had been killed. Then, a cloud of heaven-shaking evil energy soared into the sky. The evil energy was like a sharp sword that slashed down from the sky, splitting the blurry stardust in half. The remnant evil energy wrapped around the separated stardust and rolled to the sides, clearing up the sky and revealing the situation of Xie Sanren and the others. Many of the experts who had been controlled were injured or killed. However, Xie Sanren was unharmed. A layer of evil energy floated around his body, blocking all the self-destruction attacks. However, his face was filled with anger. Who is it? The first person he thought of was the Holy Spirit King in the Forbidden Forest. With Su Ming's strength after inheriting Venerable Golden Light's divine ability, normal Holy Spirits couldn't even withstand a single blow from Su Ming. Only someone at the level of the Holy Spirit King could subdue Su Ming and control him to self-destruct. Suddenly, Serene discovered a cloud of black mist flowing at the place where Su Ming self-destructed. Just as he was about to see what it was, the black mist suddenly condensed into the word death and shot towards Serene. Serene's expression changed slightly. The evil energy around his body turned into several runes that circled around his body, acting as a defense. However, the word death was extremely strange. The instant it came into contact with the evil energy runes, those runes quickly withered and dimmed, as if they had died. Serene's pupils contracted in disbelief. His evil energy was filled with a large amount of profound path energy. Even a late-stage, great venerable would find it difficult to break through it. However, the word death easily destroyed all of them. Since the evil energy couldn't block it, Serene took out a jade seal. The jade seal emitted a powerful Tao artifact's ripple and burst with divine light. When the word death collided with the divine light, it still corroded it. However, as soon as the divine light disappeared, the jade seal continuously released new divine light, continuing to resist the word death. After failing to break through the jade seal's defense, the word death flickered violently, then suddenly collapsed into a cloud of pitch-black air current. The air current condensed into a sinister black demonic claw that grabbed the entire jade seal's divine light in its palm. It then forcefully squeezed. With a loud explosion, a large amount of divine light was destroyed and scattered in all directions. The Imperial Jade Seal's defense was finally broken, but the power of the death character was finally exhausted and slowly dissipated. But before he died, the demon claw stretched out a finger and quickly drew a line of words in the air. "In 10 days, I'll take your life." The 6 incomparably clear black characters were filled with an aura of death, as if they had been written by the Death Sovereign. Even a great venerable realm powerhouse like Serene couldn't help but shudder as he stared at those calm, yet firm words. He felt extremely uncomfortable. However, this was not the end. The 6 characters existed for 10 breaths of time before exploding. Wisps of death chi scattered in all directions. The evil Serene was prepared and quickly retreated. However, he still could not avoid being hit by a thread of deathly aura. As a result, his wrist immediately turned into a deathly gray color. His flesh immediately rotted, losing all signs of life. Furthermore, it was rapidly spreading beyond his wrist. Evil Practitioner was shocked. Even Xian Dao Master's body could rot. He made a prompt decision and shook his arm, breaking everything below his wrist. Only then was he able to isolate the influence of that trace of death chi. Staring at the bleeding wound on his wrist, the evil Serene's expression was as calm as still water. Who is it? Who is it? He didn't remember offending a dominator of the realm of death. The only thing that could affect the body of Xian Dao Master was the legendary realm of death. However, the realm of death had never appeared outside the area. Taking a deep look at the Forbidden Forest, the evil smile on the evil Serene's face was replaced by deep fear. Could it be that taboo existence in the Forbidden Forest? Thinking of this, the evil Serene's heart could not help but tremble. He did not dare to go any further. "Leave immediately," the evil Serene immediately commanded, controlling the group of people to leave quickly. This was not a place to stay for long. However, no matter how far away they were, the faint pressure in the evil Serene's heart could not be eliminated, making him feel slightly uneasy. It was as if something big was going to happen to him. At the same time, in the Forbidden Forest, deep within the crack in space, near the ball of light, the heaven-splitting ancestor was patiently refining the golden Xuan Wu, glancing sideways at Su Yu from time to time. A thoughtful look appeared in his eyes. The ancient god Jiolong is the only one who has achieved this in all these eras, isn't he? It's a pity that he is nowhere to be found. Looking at Suyu transforming the laws one by one, the heaven-splitting ancestor said softly, "It is easy to transform the laws, but once it is, there is no turning back. Either you absorb the flames of the way and become a pathmaster, or you die in the flames of the way and become a part of the heavenly law." The ancient god Jiulong did not want the descendants of the nine-star civilization, but chose a lowly human from outside the area. Is he helping or harming? The heaven-splitting ancestor shook his head. He was not optimistic that Suyu would become a pathmaster. Throughout the ages, there was one step that those who became pathmasters could never take. That was to ignite the flames of the way. Successfully absorbing the flames of the way would allow one to become a pathmaster. But if one failed to do so, one would die in the flames of the way and be refined into a part of the heavenly law, completely disappearing from the world. Even if one mastered the law of life, one could not bring the dead back to life. That would be complete annihilation. The stronger the laws, the more powerful the flames of the way would be when the flames of the way were ignited. The highest and only record in the extraterrestrial world belonged to the Tianyi Empress. She was a genius who had mastered the domain of time and space. However, she had succeeded only because she had the help of a mysterious strong man from an 8-star civilization. That time, she almost died in it too. Now, Suyu had not only chosen the domain of time and space, but 8 different domains. In the entire life of the heaven-splitting ancestor, he had only heard of one person who had succeeded. It was the ancient god Jiulong of this era. Within several eras, the ancient god Jiulong was the first and only person who had succeeded. However, the ancient god Jiulong had succeeded because he was from a first-rate race and had received many legacies from the previous era. Suyu was a mere human, without a powerful bloodline or the help of a powerful background. To emulate the ancient god Jiulong and achieve the 8 great domains was simply overestimating himself. Therefore, he lamented that the ancient god Jiulong was trying to harm him. There was only one outcome, and that was to be buried in the flames of the way and become a part of the heavenly law. So he did not notice this at all. He was wholeheartedly cultivating in isolation, refining the remaining laws one by one. 3 days later, with the help of the divine throne of the heavens and earth, the 8 laws succeeded one after another. 8 vast images traversed the crevice space and revolved around Suyu, intertwining to form a myriad of strange scrolls. Suyu's eyes opened slowly at that moment. Looking at the 8 great domains in front of him, Suyu's heart was exceptionally heavy. Chapter 2444. What Suyu wanted to ignite wasn't just one type of pathfire, but 8. Every single one of them was the pinnacle. If he failed, he would die a graveless death and be unable to reincarnate. However, he had no way out. I've been waiting for this moment for a long time, so how can I retreat now? Suyu's eyes were filled with determination. The Pathmaster was the turning point in Suyu's life. If he succeeded, he would be like a carp leaping over the dragon gate, soaring to become a dragon and proudly roaming the 9 heavens. Whether it was protecting Qin Xian'er, reviving Imo Qinglong, finding the heartless iron trap, or heading to the sinful lady palace, there was hope. If he failed, then everything he had done in this life would be reduced to dust, a remnant of the passage of time. This should be the most important moment of his life. Letting out a long breath, Suyu stood up slowly. His left eye, which was tightly opened, was filled with determination. The first flame ignite. Suyu said slowly. The hourglass formed by the time domain suddenly ignited and turned into a ball of deep purple flame. This was the Tao fire, the heavenly Tao fire that was filled with the domain of time. The flames emitted a terrifying power that was in no way inferior to Master Xian Daoju's. Even though they were still far away, Suyu's body was burning with intense pain, and even his hair and eyebrows were starting to burn. What he needed to do was not only face the flames. Instead, he needed to devour and absorb them. Human, let me give you a word of advice. Your ambition must match your ability. Don't do things that are beyond your ability. A flame of the way in the domain of time is your limit. Give up on the rest, the sky's splitting Tao ancestor said indifferently. Suyu's gaze was calm. How could he give up? If he was willing to stay in a domain, he would have ignited his Tao fire long ago when he had mastered the spatial domain. Why wait bitterly until today? Moreover, he would be mediocre for the rest of his life. How could he protect those he should protect and save those he should save? In the sinful fire, you can either be reborn or undergo nirvana, Suyu said slowly. The second flame, ignite. Heaven-splitting patriarch shook his head and sighed. I've seen too many arrogant geniuses in my life, but they all ended up the same way. I believe you won't be an exception. He had already advised Suyu. Since Suyu didn't want to listen to him, there was no point in saying anything more. Hence, he decided to let Suyu fend for himself. They had nothing to do with each other anyway. The third flame, ignite. The words of the heaven-splitting ancestor did not affect Suyu in the slightest. As soon as he finished speaking, Suyu summoned the path fire of the third realm. The fourth, number 5, until the reincarnation domain turned into a ball of raging flames. The 8 balls of flames were bright and scorching, like the sun of the 9 heavens. The 8 rays formed a line, emitting a world-destroying heat that soared into the sky. The scorching heat far surpassed the world-destroying ripples of light in the depths of the eastern region. 8 different colored flames erupted with brilliance, rushing out of the crack, rushing out of the forbidden forest, rushing out of the eastern region, and radiating outwards. From the sea of constellation civilization in the west to the East Pole market in the east, everyone could feel a strange color descending upon the mortal realm. Countless experts, regardless of whether they were cultivating in seclusion or sparring with each other, stopped and stared at the 8-colored light in astonishment. The void that had been silent and dark since ancient times was thus embellished by the 8-colored light. It was unprecedentedly gorgeous. Near the sea of constellations civilization. Suddenly, under the illumination of the 8-colored light, the void trembled. Near the sea of constellation civilization, a huge 6-star civilization had appeared without warning. It seemed to have appeared out of thin air without warning. However, the strange thing was that the sphere of civilization was spinning. If one were to look down, one would realize that this was no civilization at all. It was clearly a giant eye that had opened. One eye was the eye of a behemoth from a 6-star civilization. A pitch-black object with a body that stretched into the depths of the void, its silhouette endless, was faintly discernible. Its body was emitting an extremely destructive aura. If Suyu were here, he would definitely recognize it. It was none other than the Tao Tai, the long-awaited 8 Great Supreme Domain. A look of relief flashed across the Tao Tai's eyes. I almost thought that the ancient god Jiolong had returned, but it turns out to be an overconfident little thing. It even escaped from my body. It opened its eyes, then slowly closed them again and sneered. Courting death. How could the path of the ancient god Jiolong be taken by an ordinary person? In the demon realm, a 6-star civilization in the western region, under the setting sun, Huangfu Liang and Mo Xiaochai were patiently teaching a boy the martial path. He was only 10 years old, but his cultivation had already reached the level of a half-path master, far surpassing that of Huangfu Liang and Mo Xiaochai. However, the most peculiar thing about him was not his cultivation, but his left eye, which was emerald in color, as brilliant as a round pearl. That eye contained extraordinary power, as if it could destroy the world at any time. Mo Xiaochai stared at that eye, her heart filled with worry. The boy in front of her was the child she had carried for 10 years. When he was born with an emerald eye. That eye was a gift that Suyu had given her and her husband before he left. It was the Death Heavenly Path eye. She had never expected that this eye would become their child's eye. Moreover, he was born with the ability to control it. With a single glance, he could destroy all Taos. Ear, are you tired? Take a rest. Huangfu Liang smiled as he waved his hand. The child's name was Huangfu Yi, and he had both the bloodline of the demon clan and the human clan. Huangfu Yi was only 10 years old, but he was extremely calm and composed. He did not seem like a 10-year-old child at all. He shook his head lightly, looked at the horizon, and said, "I am not tired, and I cannot rest. Otherwise, I will never be able to catch up to Uncle Suyu." He had grown up listening to Suyu's stories. In Huangfu Yi and Mo Xiaochai's stories, Suyu was an omnipotent and invincible heaven's favored son of heaven. He was a peerless person who stood tall in the world. From then on, he had set Suyu as his goal, and he had been working hard to catch up. Suddenly, Huangfu Yi saw an 8-colored wave of light sweeping toward him from the horizon. He covered his left eye, and a sense of familiarity welled up in his heart. It's Uncle Suyu. He and Suyu each had a heavenly path death eye. The 8 balls of path fire swept over the aura of the 9 jade spiritual pearl on Suyu's body, and Huangfu Yi sensed it. Suyu, Huangfu Liang, and Mo Xiaochai were shocked when they saw this. They had thought that Suyu was already dead. "Father, Mother, I want to look for Uncle Suyu," Huangfu Yi said after a moment of silence. Huangfu Liang and Mo Xiaochai looked at each other and smiled bitterly. They had long thought that a 6-star civilization would not be able to keep their child and that he would leave sooner or later. They just did not expect it to happen so soon. "Go and tell Uncle Suyu to take care of himself," Huangfu Liang said. Huangfu Yi grinned. "I have long wanted to see Uncle Suyu with my own eyes." As he spoke, the heavenly path death eye in his left eye suddenly flashed. The 9 heavens shook violently, and a wave of heavenly law energy swept over and landed under his feet. He had used his eyes to control the heavenly law. "I'm going." Huangfu Yi jumped onto the heavenly law and instantly escaped with it. In an instant, he flew out of the 6-star civilization and arrived at the 7-star civilization's region. Chapter 2445. The 7 Ultimate Civilizations. The strong men of the civilizations had left for the Forbidden Forest to participate in the recruitment of the 8-star civilizations. There was no one in the civilizations. In the territory of the 7th Ultimate Family, there was the Silver Soul Void Sea that no one could enter. A beautiful woman in a red robe, whose face was so beautiful that the sun and the moon lost their splendor, was slowly stepping into the Silver Soul Void Sea. Countless of dangerous silver soul worms avoided her when she approached, automatically opening up a path, as though they were afraid of her. If Suyu were here, he would definitely recognize her as Xia Jingyu. They had the same face and soul, and even their auras were the same. It was just that their temperaments were different. The Tianyi Side Palace. She stepped into the Silver Soul Void Sea, her beautiful eyes reflecting the ruins. On top of the palace hung the words Heavenly Legacy Side Palace. Chi. In the ruins, an ancient tower stood tall, with a creature that looked like a snake but not a snake, but a dragon coiled around it. It had 9 heads, and the cultivation level revealed by each head was no lower than that of a Pathmaster of the Forgetting Words realm. Its overall strength was comparable to that of a Pathmaster of the Fish Dragon realm. Its whole body was tense, and it gave the woman a warning hissing sound with fear and dread. The woman looked up and smiled gently. "I'm here to borrow something from the palace. Don't worry about it." As she spoke, she ignored the sea serpent's warning and stepped into the palace. As soon as she entered, a beautiful female corpse lying on the bed in a closed bedroom suddenly opened her eyes, and her body began to regain vitality. Her eyes were full of surprise. She opened the bedroom door, stood in the shadow, and stared at the newcomer. "You are." She was the owner of this place, the agile imperial concubine, the favorite concubine of the Tianyi Great Emperor. She looked at the unbelievably beautiful woman in front of her, and even as an exquisite beauty, she couldn't help but feel ashamed of herself. A passerby, the red-robed woman looked at the agile imperial concubine indifferently. "You've been holding on to your last breath for half an era. Who are you waiting for?" The agile imperial concubine's pupils constricted, and she was shocked. Someone had seen through her. "Forget it, it doesn't matter," the red-robed woman said indifferently. "I'll borrow your 9 bays Sky Division formation." Upon hearing that, the agile imperial concubine asked, "Who are you? How did you know about the 9 beta Sky splitting formation?" The 9-unity sky splitting formation was a relic that the Sky Legacy Emperor had hidden in the Agile Palace, and he had never revealed it to anyone else. How did the beautiful woman in front of him know about this? What I know is much more than you can imagine. The red-robed woman took a light step forward, stirring up the dust in the ruins of the palace. Even the bedroom where the agile imperial concubine was collapsed and turned into pieces that flew into the sky. The entire area was cleared, revealing the clean ground. Only now did one realize that there were many crisscrossing grooves on the ground. Looking down from the sky, he discovered that all the grooves were woven into a huge formation. The agile concubine was at the center of the formation. She stared at the woman in red and bellowed, "Mirage Dragon!" Roar. 9 furious roars resounded throughout the world at the same time. The 9-headed sea serpent quickly climbed down and revealed the true appearance of the ancient tower. It was a huge crystal pillar. Its 9 heads bit onto the crystal pillar, and a huge amount of energy was injected into the sea serpent's body from the crystal pillar. The sea serpent's energy skyrocketed. In the blink of an eye, it went from the fish dragon realm to the heaven being realm, then from the heaven being realm to the great venerable realm, and finally to the master of Xiandao realm. The red-robed woman was a bit surprised. That's surprising. If I remember correctly, this crystal pillar came from the space-time ancient city of an 8-star civilization, right? The agile imperial concubine's beautiful eyes locked onto the other party, and ripples spread out in her eyes. She even knows about the space-time ancient city. Who is she? Roar. After reaching the master of Xiandao realm, the sea serpent roared, and its huge body whizzed over. It was covered in illusions and enveloped the red-robed woman within it. Instantly, the scene in the red-robed woman's vision changed. The 9-beta sky splitting formation disappeared, and in its place was a young man with a feminine face. He stared at her coldly, like a poisonous snake. Realizing it was him, the red-robed woman's pupils constricted. She said with hatred, "Emperor Xiaoyao, Qingyun, you can't escape from me. Just be a vessel for Emperor Mirrorflower." Emperor Xiaoyao smiled coldly. Hearing that, the red-robed woman was shaken. She couldn't suppress the fear in her eyes. The moment she was shaken, a cold feeling pierced through her chest. The scene in front of her suddenly shattered. Along with Emperor Xiaoyao, they turned into nothingness. What appeared in front of her was the huge sea serpent. It pierced through the red-robed woman's body with one of its tentacles. It turned out that everything she had just seen was an illusion created by the sea serpent. It could keenly capture the weakest part of the enemy's mind and use it to create an illusion to shake the enemy's mind. Then, it would take the chance to give the enemy a fatal blow. A trace of colorful blood flowed down from the red-robed woman's mouth. She said with self-mockery, "What a powerful illusion. Even I fell for it." But she looked up, and her eyes were filled with coldness. "I can't be killed." Her body shook, and the tentacle that pierced in her body was immediately broken. A ghastly bloody hole the size of a bowl appeared on his chest. However, there was no wound in the bloody hole. There wasn't even the blood of a living creature. Sizzle. A puff of blue smoke floated by, and her injury was instantly healed. She stared at the sea serpent and let out a breath. The air blew on the sea serpent and petrified its body. The sea serpent turned pale with fright. It hurriedly used the Xian Daoist Lord's power to resist. However, the petrified area wasn't affected at all, and it quickly spread to the rest of its body. In a few breaths, the sea serpent was petrified into a statue in panic. The agile concubine saw this, and she was shocked. The Xian Daoist Lord Sea Serpent was petrified so easily. Who was this red-robed woman in front of her? How could she be so terrifying? After dealing with the sea serpent, the red-robed woman looked at the agile concubine. "Don't do anything meaningless." Then, she walked toward the agile concubine. However, at this moment, an 8-colored ripple radiated from the horizon. It filled the heavens and the earth and dyed the entire sky 8 colors. It was an extremely shocking sight. The red-robed woman's footsteps came to an abrupt halt. She looked up at the sky in shock. The 8 great supremes have descended. Is it ancient god Geelong? No, it's not him. Could it be the successor of ancient god Geelong? Her face was filled with bewilderment. After pondering for a moment, the red-robed woman suddenly turned around and walked toward the sky. Without looking back, she said, "I'll come back another day to borrow the array." The moment she left, the petrified sea serpent was freed. It stared at the retreating figure of the red-robed woman with extreme fear. It felt an indescribable fear and dread. Lazuli civilization. In the Lazuli ancient cave, the insect ancestor, snake ancestor, and bone ancestor all looked at the entrance of the Lazuli ancient cave as if they were facing a great enemy. Their instincts told them that an extremely terrifying existence had arrived at the entrance of the Lazuli ancient cave. He was standing at the entrance and observing the 3 ancestors. Even though they were strong, the 3 ancestors felt like they were 3 frogs that had been targeted by a venomous snake. Who's outside? The insect ancestors swallowed hard. Even in the previous epic, there were only a few people that could make him so afraid. The snake ancestor felt his scalp go numb. He shook his head continuously. Even the coldest and arrogant bone ancestor was tense. He took a deep breath and said slowly, "It can only be one of the 9 great sacred ancestors, or one of the 8 great ancient gods of this epic." Just as they were filled with fear, an 8-colored ripple that could sweep through thousands of worlds swept over. The 3rd ancestor was shocked when he saw the 8-colored ripple. The 8 great supremes domains? How is this possible? Could someone in this epic control the 8 great supremes domains? Just as they were shocked, the gaze that was observing them at the entrance suddenly disappeared. The pressure on the 3rd ancestor suddenly eased. The insect ancestor said doubtfully, "He left?" The snake ancestor still maintained a vigilant posture. He said uncertainly, "He should have left." The bone ancestor stared at the 8-colored ripple and let out a long sigh. We have to thank this unknown fluctuation of the 8 great domains. Otherwise, thinking of the gaze that made them feel extreme fear, the bone ancestor's forehead involuntarily dripped with cold sweat. East Region God Palace. The evil Sanrin slowly waited for the half-living puppet to be refined as he paced back and forth with his hands behind his back. Ever since the mysterious Death Master left a message that he would take his life in 10 days, he could not eat or sleep in peace. There was always an extremely uneasy feeling in his heart that made it hard for him to calm down. At this moment, an 8-colored ripple swept over and turned the entire East Region into a sea of 8 colors. The evil Sanrin's footsteps stopped in midair. He turned his head to look at the sky outside the palace in disbelief. He turned pale with fright. The 8 great supremes domains. How is this possible? Those who can open one of the 8 great supremes domains are all heaven-defying monsters. 8. Only ancient God 9 Dragons has ever done that. The evil Sanrin's expression kept changing as he thought of the Death Master who had left him a message. The Death Domain was one of the 8 great supremes domains. Damn it! How did I offend him? The uneasiness in the evil Sanrin's heart became even stronger. Could it be that the half-living puppet that I control has this person's exclusive property? Thinking of this, the evil Sanrin felt a trace of regret. Was he too arrogant and rash? Outside the East Region God Palace, Madame Poisonlife was bored to death as she lay in a pavilion and drank. She looked at the sky and drank alone. Don't listen to the sound of leaves hitting the forest. Thousands of leaves are filled with hatred. Husband, why are you so heartless to me? Sigh. Madame Poisonlife raised her head and drank. Just as she was about to improvise a few mournful and lingering songs, she suddenly realized that the world had turned into 9 colors. Waves of powerful domain fluctuations swept over like a torrential storm. Madame Poisonlife was so shocked that she spat out all the wine in her mouth. She cried out involuntarily, "Are you kidding me? The 8 great supremes domains? Am I King dreaming?" She couldn't help but curse because of this. Chapter 2446. After pondering for a moment, he gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, let's not worry about my husband for now. How can I miss such a rare event? Deep within the forbidden forest, Suyu faced the 8 flames of Wei of different colors alone. His eyes were unprecedentedly firm and solemn. It's either succeed or die trying. Suyu walked forward and weaved a seal on his abdomen. A vortex appeared in Suyu's abdomen, and the 8 masses of elemental flames flowed into his body through the vortex. The flames of the Wei had already entered his body. Only by absorbing them could he break through the shackles of the Emperor Realm and become the master of the Great Tao. However, each of the 8 balls of Tao fire was the pinnacle of Tao fire. It was easier said than done to absorb it and not destroy it. The moment it entered Suyu's body, the 8 flames of the Wei burned Suyu's abdomen to a crisp. 8 small suns appeared and continued to incinerate the rest of Suyu's body. Within a breath's time, Suyu would be incinerated into ashes, never to be reincarnated. The Royal Dragon Sword. At the moment of life and death, Suyu bellowed and summoned the Royal Dragon Sword to suppress the 8 masses of flames. The Regal Dragon Sword was, after all, a divine sword that had been passed down by the Dragon Clan for thousands of generations. The sword pressed down horizontally, suppressing the 8 balls of flames and stopping their burning momentum. Seizing the opportunity, Suyu absorbed a strand of flame that was as thin as a strand of hair from the 8 balls of pathfire. After the flame was absorbed, it cooled down immediately and turned into a Taoist mark, which was imprinted on Suyu's chest. This mark was the proof that Suyu had become a pathmaster. When one's Tao marks were filled, it was the time to become a great Tao master. 1 strand, 2 strands, 3 strands. Suyu seized every second to absorb the flames of the Wei. When he absorbed the 10th strand, there were already 10 scars on his chest. The patriarch of the heaven-splitting patriarch watched from the side and nodded slightly. When ordinary living beings break through and absorb all of the Tao fire, they can only carve 20 Tao marks. However, the Tao fire formed by a supreme martial artist's domain absorbs 1/10 of the Tao fire, and there are 10 Tao marks. The more marks one had, the more energy one would obtain when breaking through to become a Tao Lord, and the higher one's cultivation would be. When most living beings broke through to become Tao Lords and completely absorbed the Tao fire, they would only obtain 20 Tao marks. Only a few people could surpass them. At present, Suyu had only absorbed 1/10 of the Time Realm's Wei flame, which was 10 marks of the Wei. Absorbing another 10th of it would be equivalent to absorbing everything an ordinary living being needed to break through to become a Tao Lord. However, it was at this moment that the Royal Scepter Dragon Sword let out a sound of being overwhelmed. A slight chi-chi sound came from the surface of the sword. Narrowing his eyes, Zhang Xian noticed that the dragon inscriptions on the surface of the Sovereign Dragon Sword actually showed signs of melting. Suyu's heart skipped a beat. Even the Royal Power Dragon Sword, created by the Ancestral Dragon, couldn't withstand the burning of 8 balls of Tao fire. His absorption had only just begun. His heart was filled with urgency as he continued to race against time to absorb the Tao fire. 1 strand, 2 strands, 3 strands. As the Tao fire continued to absorb the energy, the Royal Dragon Sword was gradually overwhelmed. When Suyu absorbed the 30th thread, more than half of the Royal Dragon Sword had melted. Balls of flames of the Wei sprang out from the melting point, increasing Suyu's burden. Hang in there. Suyu gritted his teeth and frantically absorbed the flames of the Wei. Finally, after he absorbed a total of 50 strands, the Sovereign Dragon Sword completely melted, turning into a puddle of molten iron. The Royal Dragon Sword that had accompanied him for so many years was destroyed just like that. A look of melancholy flashed across Suyu's eyes. However, he had no time to be distracted, as he had only absorbed half of the Tao fire formed by the time domain. The power of the 8 balls of Tao fire was only slightly weakened. Suyu made up his mind and took out the heaven-destroying rod. Long, thick. All of a sudden, the heaven-destroying rod turned into a huge, thick rod and pressed down on the 8 balls of Tao fire. The raging Tao fire was once again suppressed. Suyu seized the opportunity to absorb the Tao fire again. Time passed like water. When he had absorbed 30 strands of Tao fire, the heaven-destroying rod, like the royal dragon sword, could not avoid the fate of being melted. Drops of melted liquid dripped down continuously. After absorbing 50 strands, the entire heaven-destroying rod melted completely. Suyu had sacrificed the royal dragon sword and the heaven-destroying rod, two of his most useful Tao artifacts. But all he had obtained was the Tao fire of the time domain. There were still 7 balls of Tao fire left, and their power was wreaking havoc in his body. The heaven-splitting ancestor shook his head. This is the end. In his opinion, this was Suyu's limit, and he could not continue to suppress the Tao fire. His fate was to be burned into ashes by the remaining 7 balls of Tao fire and become a part of the heavenly law. However, Suyu's mind was not shaken. Sinful sword, come out. Suyu raised his hand again, and the sinful lady's sinful sword fell into his palm. In terms of sword quality, the sin sword was above the royal dragon's sovereign sword. Under the strong pressure, the 7 balls of Tao fire were once again suppressed. This is the wicked girl's Tao artifact. Patriarch Heaven-Splitting's pupils shrank as he whispered. He had never expected that Suyu would have such a sword. Looking at Suyu using the sinful sword to suppress the path fire, the heaven-splitting ancestor couldn't help but feel pained. What a reckless waste of God's gift. If this sword could be tempered further, it would definitely become a peerless weapon that could sweep through all eras. Yet, a brat like you used it to break through to become a Tao Lord. He felt a bit of regret and jealousy. The royal power, the dragon's sovereign sword, and the heaven-destroying rod were fine, but he even had the sinful sword. Suyu's wealth was beyond the heaven-cracking ancestor's expectations. After suppressing the flames of Wei, Suyu continued to absorb them. 1 strand, 2 strands, 3 strands. The sinful sword's quality was extraordinary, and it was only after Suyu absorbed 100 Tao flames that it was finally melted, turning into a pitch-black liquid that dripped into the Tao flames. He took the opportunity to absorb the Tao fire formed by the space domain. Of the 8 balls of Tao fire, 6 were left. The power of the Tao fire was still astonishing. What was more worrying was that there were not many things that Suyu could use. Could it still suppress the Tao fire? The heaven-splitting ancestor withdrew his gaze from the golden tortoise in his hand, a touch of curiosity in his eyes. The royal power, the dragon's sovereign sword, the heaven-destroying rod, and the sinful sword were all gone, right? Unexpectedly, Suyu suddenly took out a finger. The finger contained the remnant aura of an ancestor. The finger of an ancestor-level old monster from the last era. The heaven-splitting ancestor was really surprised, and he looked Suyu up and down, his eyes filled with astonishment. How many secrets did Suyu have? As soon as the insect ancestor's finger appeared, it immediately suppressed the 6 balls of Tao fire. However, its suppressive power was obviously not as strong as the other 3. Suyu absorbed more than 30 strands, and the insect ancestor's finger was melted. The remaining heat surged up violently. Suyu's eyes fluttered, and he gritted his teeth slightly as he took out the 9 jade spiritual pearl. World-destroying dust, come out. From the spiritual pearl, the supreme growing soil in the entire nursery, which was the world-destroying dust, flew out in unison. A total of 1,000,000 grains turned into a wall, which suppressed the 6 balls of Tao fire. All of a sudden, the Tao fire was suppressed. So much world-destroying dust. The heaven-splitting ancestor stood up abruptly, staring at the world-destroying dust that filled the sky in disbelief. This dust was difficult to find in the outside world, and there were only a few remnants at the bottom of the void. Sometimes, even one was hard to find. However, Suyu had a total of 1,000,000 drops. A grain of world-destroying dust fell into the Tao fire and was immediately burned into ashes, unable to block the Tao fire. However, when one grain was burned, there were millions of world-destroying dust left. 1,000,000 grains were enough to suppress the 6 balls of Tao fire for a long time. Finally, Suyu absorbed all the Tao fire formed by the Soul Realm, and the millions of world-destroying dust were completely melted. Of the 8 balls of Tao fire, he had only absorbed 3, and there were still 5 left. Each of the balls could easily burn Suyu to death. He was still facing an incomparable crisis of life and death. The world-destroying dust had been used up. Suyu's mind was spinning rapidly, and he gritted his teeth as he took out a foxtail. This item came from a 9-tailed white fox, stone embryo son of heaven. In the past, the human ancestor had personally destroyed a stone embryo son of heaven, which was the 9-tailed son of heaven. One of her tails had gone missing, and it had ended up in Suyu's hands. As a part of the body of the stone embryo son of heaven, although it had been many years since it left the body and was no longer as powerful as it was in the past, it was definitely not inferior to the sinful sword. Suyu pressed down with his 5 fingers, pressing it against the 5 balls of Tao fire, immediately suppressing the Tao fire. He took the opportunity to absorb the Tao fire. Seeing this, the heaven-splitting ancestor could no longer remain calm. This, the tail of a 9-tailed son of heaven. How did you get it? Suyu ignored him completely and continued to absorb the silk threads. The body of the stone embryo son of heaven was extraordinary indeed. Suyu absorbed another 100 silk threads, and only half of them were melted. If that was the case, he might be able to absorb an entire ball of Tao fire in one go. In that case, there would only be 3 balls of Tao fire left, and the pressure would be much less. However, at that moment, the heaven-splitting ancestor reminded him, "Human, don't be careless. I heard that when the ancient god Jiulong broke through the 8 great supreme realm, the most dangerous part wasn't the front, but the 4 balls of Tao fire at the back." There was such a thing? Suyu's heart skipped a beat. Before he was mentally prepared, the remaining 4 balls of Tao fire suddenly soared. The flames were more than twice as strong as before. What's going on? Suyu was shocked. The tail was melting at a speed visible to the naked eye under the blazing flames that had doubled in size. Trying to control the supreme realm in vain is going against the great way. You've absorbed 4 balls of supreme realm Tao fire in a row, which has already aroused the heavenly law's fear. The heaven-splitting ancestor looked up at the sky. In his vision, he could vaguely see something obscure. From now on, if you absorb a ball of Tao fire, the power of the remaining Tao fire will double again, until you can no longer bear it and are burned into nothingness, becoming a part of the heavenly law. Suyu's heart sank to the bottom. How could this be? Under normal circumstances, as the Tao fire was devoured one by one, its power would weaken, and it would be easier to absorb it. However, the truth was that the subsequent process was even more difficult. Poof! The flames burned through the fox's tail and pounced on him. The temperature of the flames was much higher than when the 8 balls of Tao fire were fused. Suyu's chest was instantly burned. The remaining sparks followed along his body and burned all over it. Suyu didn't have the incarnation of the law of life at the moment, so he only had a body. He made a prompt decision to break off his body below the heart, leaving only his head and half of his body. Boundless, excruciating pain assaulted him like a raging storm, causing him to almost pass out. However, Suyu knew that he couldn't pass out just yet. Once he passed out, what awaited him would be the raging Tao fire that would burn him into nothingness. Chapter 2447. He clenched his teeth and endured the immense pain. Dragon Emperor's body appear. After the Dragon Emperor was assassinated by Xie Sanren, Suyu kept his body. The 10,000-foot-long golden dragon body was thrown out and suppressed the 4 balls of path fire. The dragon tribe had the strongest physique in the outer realms, and their path power was difficult to destroy. As the Dragon Emperor who had cultivated the Dragon Abyss treasure scroll, his body was unparalleled and could be considered the best in the outer realms. It wouldn't be too far off from the Sovereign Dragon Sword. However, as soon as it was placed on the 4 balls of path fire, it began to melt. His dragon scales were quickly scorched black, and his flesh was a mess of flesh and blood, constantly evaporating. Suyu's heart sank as he absorbed the path fire without hesitation. He only had time to absorb 20 wisps before the Dragon Emperor's body was incinerated. The path fire rose again, even more ferocious than before. Su Yu had used up most of the treasures he had. Only some extremely precious items were not suitable for use. However, it seemed that he had to use them now. Swish! A transparent crystal bone floated in his palm. It was a broken bone of the ancient god Mysterious Gold, which came from the evil Master Cemetery. It had been obtained by the evil bone of the Roaring Sky Wolf King, and its strength had increased greatly. Su Yu had almost been helpless against it. In the end, the bone was obtained by Su Yu, and the blood of the ancient god was extracted. The golden bone turned transparent. Now that he had taken it out, the bone was still extremely heavy and difficult to hold. Suppress. He threw the bone down. An incomparably heavy pressure suppressed the surging path fire. However, the bone had lost its divine blood and was no longer as powerful as it used to be after an entire era. Not long after it was suppressed, it began to show signs of melting. Su Yu's eyes turned cold, and he immediately seized the time to absorb the path fire. The strength of the bone was far greater than that of the insect ancestor's finger. After absorbing 70 wisps of the path fire, the bone finally melted. At this point, Su Yu had successfully absorbed 5 of the 8 path fires. Beside him, the heaven-splitting ancestor had long since changed from the initial contempt to the present solemn and intense anticipation. 5 supreme realm Tao fires. Incredible, incredible. If he had not seen it with his own eyes, the heaven-splitting ancestor would have found it hard to believe that there was anyone in this world who could absorb the 8 realm flames to this extent. So far, there are already 5 groups. With 3 more, he would be able to regain the splendor of ancient god Nine Dragon and become the second person to control one of the 8 supremes. However, just as he had said, the power of the elemental fire would be even more terrifying as it progressed. There were only 3 balls of Tao fire left, but the power of the flames did not weaken. Instead, it doubled. At this moment, the power of the flames was more than twice as powerful as when the 8 balls of Tao fire had first merged. In an instant, raging flames surged up. However, there were not many things that Su Yu could use to suppress the flames of the way. Su Yu clenched his teeth and summoned the small Kylin. Come out! A wave of chaotic power appeared in the 9 jade spiritual pearl, and the little Kylin stared at the fire of the way in front of it. Without any hesitation, Zhang Xian opened his mouth and spewed out a large amount of primal chaos energy to suppress the flames. However, the flames of the way that even the ancient god's bone fragments could not suppress were now twice as powerful. How could the little Kylin's meager chaotic force suppress them? In a few breaths' time, the chaotic energy was burned through and spread towards the little Qilin. Back off! Su Yu did not expect the little Kylin to suppress them. Instead, he took some time to clean up the 9 jade spiritual pearl. Many of the natural treasures that had been planted in it, as well as some of the treasures and resources that had been stored in it, were all taken out. In the end, only an empty 9 jade spiritual pearl was left. This spiritual pearl had been the eyeball of the 9-tailed emperor, and it was the most important part of the emperor's body. It was far more important than a tail. This item had accompanied Su Yu for most of his life of cultivation. If it was not necessary, he would never abandon it. But now, he had no other choice. Suppress. He threw the 9 jade spiritual pearl over. As if sensing danger, a circle of eyes appeared on the 9 jade spiritual pearl and rotated rapidly, like a living creature turning its eyeball. From within the 9 jade spiritual pearl, a mysterious wave of light that Su Yu had never seen before was released, enveloping the 3 balls of Tao fire. The wave of light was extraordinarily powerful. Not only was it not burned through by the Tao fire, but it seemed to be suppressing it gently. Joy flashed in Su Yu's eyes as he absorbed the Tao fire frantically. 1 wisp, 2 wisps, 3 wisps. It was not until the 50th wisp that the 9 jade spiritual pearl finally showed signs of dimming, as if it could no longer continue. But it continued to persevere. When Su Yu had successfully absorbed 100 balls of Tao fire, the 9 jade spiritual pearl finally melted into a ball of emerald spiritual liquid. Now, there are only 2 balls of Tao fire left. However, The power of the last 2 balls of Tao fire was twice as powerful as before. It would only take a moment for Su Yu to be burned to ashes. Therefore, Su Yu did not have the slightest bit of carelessness or hesitation. The moment the 6th ball of Tao fire was absorbed, he immediately took out the bizarre feathers of the ancestral dragon. The bizarre feathers of the ancestral dragon were refined from the heart of the female ancestral dragon. After a lifetime of refinement by the male ancestral dragon, it was no longer what it used to be. In terms of toughness, the 9 Jade spiritual pearl was far inferior. If he had taken this item out from the beginning, it could have helped Su Yu absorb 3 balls of Tao fire in a row without being extinguished. But now, as soon as he took it out, it was roasted by the 2 balls of Tao fire, and it was melting even faster than the 9 Jade spiritual pearl. The power of the Tao fire was terrifying. Su Yu was anxious, but he did not relax. He seized every moment to absorb the Tao fire. As time passed, the bizarre feathers of the ancestral dragon melted bit by bit. When Su Yu absorbed the 7th ball of Tao fire, only the last outline was left. The heaven-splitting ancestor's eyes were wide open, and his breathing was nervous and labored. The seemingly insignificant human race had left an indelible impression in his heart. Am I going to witness the birth of a new ancient god Julong? The heaven-splitting ancestor murmured, his eyes flashing with an indescribable light. 7 of the 8 great Tao fire had been absorbed, and only 1 was left. The last ball of Tao fire will be the most terrifying one. The moment the 7th ball of Tao fire was absorbed, the 8th ball of Tao fire suddenly exploded with power 4 times its initial power. In an instant, only the outline of the bizarre feathers of the ancestral dragon was left, and it melted into liquid. There was not even a moment of pause. The raging flames were about to engulf Su Yu. Su Yu clenched his teeth and took out a bronze plate. It was the stone plate that recorded the heaven's sun gazing at air, a gift from Yun Yazi. Within the stone plate was the mysterious Taishu Xian Palace. But he had no choice. The moment the bronze plate was taken out, it suppressed the last ball of Tao fire. But to Su Yu's surprise, the bronze plate melted at an extremely fast speed. It was like a ball of ice being thrown into boiling water. This was a bronze plate. Su Yu was shocked. As far as he knew, the hardness of this item was not inferior to the bizarre feathers of the ancestral dragon. Chapter 2448. He was extremely shocked, but he did not dare to stop and immediately absorbed the Tao fire. 1 wisp, 2 wisps. It was only the 10th thread, but the bronze plate had already been burned into a ball of liquid. Before the last ball of Tao fire could even absorb 1/10 of it, the bronze plate was gone. What was even more terrifying was that the last ball of Tao fire was especially terrifying. After absorbing 1/10 of it, its power actually doubled again. This time, even Patriarch Heaven Splitter's expression changed. How could this be? I've never heard of anything like this happening to ancient God 9 Dragon when he absorbs the 8th Tao flame. According to this calculation, when Su Yu absorbed the last ball of Tao fire, wouldn't the power of the Tao fire be 10 times stronger than it was now? Wouldn't it be 40 times stronger than it was in the beginning? Was it still a Tao fire that living beings could withstand? Even if ancient God 9 Dragon's true body tried again, he probably wouldn't be able to succeed. Heaven Splitter Patriarch looked at the sky and sighed. It seems like the birth of ancient God Julong has caused the great Tao of heaven and earth to be on guard. It won't allow a second ancient God Julong to appear. Withdrawing his gaze and looking at Su Yu, the heaven-splitting ancestor's eyes were filled with deep regret. It's a pity that you were born an era too late. Otherwise, you would surely be the next ancient God Julong. It's a pity that there are no ifs. Even the bronze plate had been destroyed. Su Yu had nothing left to suppress. Everyone go. He threw most of the heavenly materials and earthly treasures he had taken out from the 9 Jade spiritual pearl to the man. That was the accumulation of his entire life. However, as soon as they were thrown, the huge amount of resources were like shadows under the sun, quickly dissipating. So you only had time to absorb 2 wisps of Tao fire before all of the resources were burned up. At this point, Su Yu really had nothing left. Apart from his incomplete body, there was only little Qilin and little Butterfly, who was still evolving. At this moment, Suyu was in deep despair. Was it really going to end here? Only the last part was left. Would the path he had walked in his entire life stop at the path of Taoist Lord? The extremely ferocious flames came crashing down, intending to engulf Suyu and destroy him as a part of the heavenly law. However, at this moment, 9 heaven-shaking dragon roars resounded from the spatial rift above. A small ancient cauldron suddenly flew over. It spun and descended rapidly, forcefully suppressing the oncoming flames. The divine 9-dragon cauldron? Suyu was overjoyed. He had thought that the cauldron had already been taken by Serene, but it seemed like that was not the case. It had been in the vicinity all along, and it was only when Suyu was in danger that it suddenly appeared to rescue him. The divine 9-dragon cauldron was ancient god 9 dragons Tao artifact, one of the most powerful weapons in the entire absolute beginning realm. Its appearance successfully suppressed the flames of the way. However, the Tao fire was too fierce at the moment. Just as the divine 9 dragons cauldron was suppressed, the cauldron burned bright red. The ancient god blood in the cauldron boiled and evaporated at an extremely fast speed. When the divine blood evaporated, the divine 9-dragon cauldron would be damaged. Suyu did not dare to hesitate and immediately absorbed the flames of the way. In the blink of an eye, he had successfully absorbed 8 wisps of Tao fire. Together with the 12 wisps he had absorbed earlier, he had successfully absorbed a total of 20 wisps. He had already absorbed 20% of the 8th Tao fire. However, as expected, its power doubled again. The ancient god blood in the divine 9-dragon cauldron evaporated almost instantly. The 9 dragons on ancient god 9 dragons' back also let out draconic roars, unable to bear the burden. So you could not bear it, but he could only move forward and continue to absorb. When he absorbed another 10 wisps, the red-hot divine 9-dragon cauldron finally showed signs of melting, because the temperature of the raging fire had doubled again. In less than 10 breaths, the divine 9-dragon cauldron would be completely destroyed. This cauldron had been with him since the beginning of his cultivation. Watching it melt little by little, Suyu felt an indescribable pain in his heart. The divine 9-dragon cauldron had witnessed his rise from humble beginnings, witnessed him streaking across the lonely starry sky like a comet, and witnessed his amazing life. Was it going to accompany him in perishing and disappearing into the primeval times? A strong sense of unwillingness welled up in his heart. Enduring it again and again, Suyu pushed the divine 9-dragon cauldron away, smiling sadly in his heart. Forget it. Even if you burn everything, I won't succeed. Go find your new master. Rather than letting it accompany him in perishing, it was better to let it go. However, the divine 9-dragon cauldron that was pushed away returned, blocking the remaining flames of the way. Since they had met, it had always silently protected Suyu, intervening in his most dangerous moments until it was destroyed. Suyu's heart was moved, and his blood was boiling. He recalled the time when he first entered the martial path, again and again fighting against heaven and earth, and against fate. All right, we will live and die together, and we will never bow our heads. Suyu held the divine 9-dragon cauldron in his hand, stepping on the boundless universe of stars, and continued to absorb the flames of the way. Even if it was a dead end in front of him, he wanted to die standing. He wanted to express his unyielding will to the merciless great path, to the unfair fate. The flames of the way were merciless, surging up and beginning to melt the divine 9-dragon cauldron. Before long, one man and one cauldron would be buried in the flames of the way, vanishing from the world. However, at that moment, the heaven-splitting ancestor was not paying attention, and the golden Xuanwu in his hand broke free from his palm and pounced over. Together with the divine 9-dragon cauldron, it suppressed the raging flames of the way. No, the heaven-splitting ancestor wanted to stop it, but it was too late. The flames of the way were terrifying, and he would be destroyed in an instant if he got close. Apart from the heartache, he could only watch as the 2 ancient gods' Tao artifacts were burned by the flames of the way. However, with the addition of the golden Xuan Wu, the pressure on the divine nine-dragon cauldron was greatly reduced, and the signs of melting were immediately alleviated. However, the two Tao artifacts could not last for too long. They would be incinerated and destroyed in 20 breaths at most. Su Yu's heart skipped a beat. The golden Xuan Wu was not related to him in any way, so there was no need for it to sacrifice itself to help Su Yu. It must have been by Wu Xin's side all year round and understood her intentions, right? Therefore, in the face of danger, Su Yu sacrificed himself to suppress the flames of the way. Tears welled up in Su Yu's eyes. Even the Tao artifacts had sacrificed themselves, so how could he give them up? Flames of the way, come on. With a loud roar, Su Yu grabbed one wisp of the flames of the way after another, absorbing them madly while enduring the excruciating pain in his body. After 10 breaths, finally, the two ancient God Tao artifacts could not be suppressed any longer, and they began to melt. At that moment, Su Yu had only absorbed 10 wisps. The 8th ball of flames of the way had only absorbed 40% in total, and there was a whole 60% left. Seeing that the two Tao artifacts were about to be destroyed, the cry of a phoenix suddenly fell into his ears. From a crack, a pitch-black phoenix the size of an arm shrieked as it flew out. It stood proudly on the divine nine-dragon cauldron and the golden Xuan Wu, suppressing the flames of the way that were about to leap up. The ancient god Jiuyo's Tao artifacts? The heaven-splitting ancestor was moved. Now, the Tao artifacts of the three great ancient gods had arrived to help Su Yu absorb the flames of the way together. Even when the ancient god Jiuyo had made a breakthrough, there had not been such a spectacle. In a fragment of space, Qin Xianer's face was pale. She gazed down and murmured, "Xiaofeng, it's all up to you now." As soon as she finished speaking, her vision darkened, and she fell unconscious. Chapter 2449. Xianer. Su Yu's heart was in turmoil. He clenched his teeth. What reason did he have to give up so easily? He could not let Xianer down. Boom. He increased his absorption power, continuing to absorb the Tao flames. However, when he absorbed 10 wisps, the power of the Tao flames surged again, instantly blasting away the three ancient God Tao artifacts. The raging flames surged forward. Within the Tao flames, a will to destroy Su Yu was born. At this moment, the temperature was 16 times higher than when the 8 balls of Tao flames were first formed. The 3 Tao artifacts could not even suppress it. If they forcibly suppressed it, it would only melt. Only 50% of the last ball of Tao flames remained. However, this was the end of it. Su Yu looked up at the fragment of space, apologizing in his heart. He had tried his best, but just as the raging flames were about to reach him, the world suddenly shone with azure light. A giant azure eye parted the dark clouds, revealing itself above the heavens. "Uncle Su Yu, I'm here." A slightly childish voice was heard. At the same time, the giant azure eye shot out a beam of azure light that connected the heavens and the earth, enveloping the Tao flames. The Tao flames that even the ancient God Tao artifacts could not suppress were suppressed by the azure light beam. Taking advantage of this opportunity, the 3 Tao artifacts swarmed forward again, suppressing the Tao flames once more. Su Yu looked into the depths of the sky, confused as to who the person calling out Uncle Su Yu was. But time waited for no man, and he had no time to think about it. He continued to absorb the Tao flames in this desperate situation. 1 wisp, 2 wisps, 3 wisps. After Su Yu had successfully absorbed the Tao flames for 10 breaths, the azure light beam finally could not withstand the explosive power of the Tao flames and shattered with a cracking sound. A pitiful groan came from the heavens. A handsome half-human, half-demon boy fell from the sky in a wobbly manner. "I'm sorry, Uncle Su Yu. The heavenly law I can control is not strong enough," the boy said apologetically. Huang Fui had relied on the heavenly law's eye of death to control the heavenly law to barely suppress the Tao flames. But the Tao flames of the 8 great supremes were too terrifying, so Huang Fui could only suppress them for a short time. So you didn't know who it was, but with his help, the last ball of flame of the way was reduced to 40%. However, This 40% Tao fire doubled its power. After the pillar of light was broken, the 3 Tao artifacts were sent flying and could no longer be suppressed. So he was unwilling to give up. Even a stranger had come to help him. What reason did he have to give up? However, even 3 Tao artifacts were unable to suppress it. Was there anything in the world stronger than the Tao artifacts of the 3 ancient gods? Suddenly, a light bulb went off in Su Yu's head, and he suddenly thought of something. His gaze suddenly shifted to some resources that had yet to be processed. A fruit with a broken shell came into view. It was a fruit born from the heavenly orchid silver bamboo. After absorbing an immeasurable amount of energy, it finally shattered, revealing a strange stone within the fruit. He still didn't know what that stone was. However, its weight was unparalleled. Until now, nothing had been able to bear the weight of that rock. Only when it was wrapped in an outer shell would it be so light. If there was anything that could suppress the Tao flames, then this was the only thing that had a sliver of hope. With the Tao flames about to pounce, Su Yu did not hesitate. With the mentality of giving a try, he grabbed the broken shell and the stone and immediately threw them over. "I'm counting on you." The fruit shell and stone were thrown over, and they actually suppressed the surging Tao flames. Su Yu's eyes lit up, and he immediately took the opportunity to absorb the Tao flames. 1 wisp, 2 wisps, 3 wisps after a total of 10 strands, the cracked shell finally emitted a few crackling sounds and melted in a liquid. However, the stone that was wrapped in the shell was not broken. Su Yu was overjoyed. There was only 20% of the Tao flames left. If the fruit could suppress it, he would successfully absorb it. Boom! The Tao flames, which had been absorbed to the point where only 2 wisps were left, exploded with a power that was 20 times greater than before. With such power, anything that was previously suppressed would have melted in a breath's time. However, the fruit calmly suppressed the Tao flames, not wavering in the slightest. Su Yu was overjoyed, his heart thumping wildly as he quickly absorbed the Tao flames. 1 wisp, 2 wisps, the Tao flames were being absorbed at a speed visible to the naked eye. In at most 20 breaths' time, all of the Tao flames would be absorbed. The stone was as steady as before, showing no signs of being absorbed. It would definitely succeed. It would definitely succeed. Even the heaven-splitting ancestor was holding his breath. Based on the performance of the mysterious stone, it would definitely be able to persist until the end. The new ancient god Jiulong was about to be born. However, when Su Yu absorbed 5 wisps, a sudden change occurred. An unknown power swept over from the depths of the 9 heavens, blowing away the stone. What? The heaven-splitting ancestor looked up at the sky, his eyes filled with anger. Who was it that interfered with Su Yu at such an important moment? Su Yu was the second person in history to master the 8 Great Supremes realm. His future had been ruined just like that. Who could be so hateful? The heaven-splitting ancestor wanted to retrieve the stone, but had already been swept far away by the mighty power. Even if he retrieved it, the raging flames would have already burned Su Yu to ashes. The person who was causing trouble in the dark had destroyed Su Yu's original hope of success. Boom! The raging flames surged forward, about to engulf Su Yu. The heaven-splitting ancestor clenched his teeth and let out a long breath. A dim yellow gas quickly engulfed the Tao flames. The Tao flames that even the ancient god Tao artifacts could not suppress were suppressed by the dim yellow gas. Although it only lasted for 2 breaths' time, it only helped Su Yu absorb 2 wisps of the Tao flames. The heaven-splitting ancestor's face turned pale, as if all his energy had been sucked out of him. He looked extremely weak. Clutching his chest, he said in a trembling voice, "Lad, this is all I can do to help you." Unfortunately, Su Yu still could not succeed. The outcome could not be changed. Just as the raging flames broke through the breath and surged forward again, a feminine voice reverberated between heaven and earth. Petrification. It was a familiar aura, a familiar soul, but a slightly unfamiliar voice. Su Yu's heart suddenly palpitated. After hearing that voice, he felt a sense of loss. He almost thought that it was Xia Jingyu who had come. A woman dressed in a red robe descended like a fairy. Her incomparably beautiful face made the sun and the moon lose their splendor. It was as if all the beautiful things in the world were overshadowed by her beauty. She blew out a breath of air, and a layer of gray air condensed on the surface of the Tao flames, petrifying the Tao flames. "This is all I can do to help you." The red-robed woman stared at Suyu with a complicated look in her eyes. As Suyu absorbed the Tao flames, he also stared at her with a complicated look in his eyes. The woman who looked exactly like Suyu, Qing Yun. Chapter 2450. Only 10% of the Tao fire was left, and it unleashed a terrifying power that was 40 times stronger than before. At this moment, Qing Yun's petrification power was unable to suppress it and was immediately burned into nothingness. At this point, there was no one and nothing that could stop him. Suyu stared at Qing Yun in the firelight and sighed deeply. Could it be that her arrival was a consolation for him before he died? He couldn't see Xia Jingyu, but he could see the exact same face and soul as Xia Jingyu. The final wisp of Tao flame carried the will of the great Tao and was extremely fierce, vowing to strangle the new ancient god Nine Dragon in the cradle. The might of his flames of the way expanded like an explosion. The light of the flames enveloped billions of galaxies and illuminated the entire outer realm. The dark nothingness was brightly illuminated by the fire. Regardless of whether it was the Sea of Constellations in the western regions or the East Pole Market in the eastern regions, both were shrouded in a blinding light. How could any living being withstand such apocalyptic flames? The cruelty, mercilessness, and ruthlessness of the Grand Tao could be imagined. Suyu smiled miserably as he welcomed the destruction unwillingly. Patriarch Heaven Splitter, Qin Yun, and Huangfu all looked at him with pity. Just like that, a monstrous genius whose brilliance could overshadow thousands of generations had fallen. There was only less than 1% left of the 8 domains. What a pity, what a pity. No matter how many epochs after this, there would not be another world-shaking prodigy like this. Furthermore, he was from the weakest 9th stream human tribe, but there was no turning back. They could only watch helplessly as Suyu was buried in the flame of the way bit by bit and completely disappeared from this world. Huangfu burst into tears. "I didn't even have time to tell you my name." Qing Yun let out a long sigh and looked into the distance. "The other me should be very lonely," the Sky Splitter group sighed in regret. "Such a genius has fallen just like that. Sacred Mountain, you're really ruthless. You've already killed so many peerless figures. Isn't it enough that you won't even let a junior off?" Clearly, the mysterious power that had sent the stone flying had made him realize something. At this moment, the whole world mourned. Together, they watched the curtain fall on a peerless monster, bidding farewell to the era that belonged to him. However, at this moment, a pair of giant hands that blotted out the sky and suppressed the universe came from both ends of the world. Suyu, who had fallen into the flame of the way, was held in his palms. The flames that could destroy the outer realms were isolated by his palms. At the same time, his hands rose up slowly, shielding Suyu as they flew into the clouds. Everyone looked up and saw a black-haired, black-eyed figure in a black cloak standing between heaven and earth. His feet stepped on the void, his head reaching the 9 heavens. His figure was so imposing that he crossed a small part of outer space. Under the illumination of the heavenly light, his projection covered the entire western region, causing the previously dazzling western region to sink into darkness. His body was emitting a peerless and invincible aura that could topple everyone. Heaven-breaking Patriarch and Qing Yun shuddered violently, looking up at the immeasurably tall, imposing figure in terror. What is that?" Patriarch Heaven-Splitting sucked in a breath of cold air. How many people in the great beginning realm had such a terrifying figure and unparalleled pressure? Qing Yun's pupils constricted, and her heart was filled with disbelief. Could it be him? Is he still alive? A trace of fear from the bottom of his heart shrouded his soul. Countless creatures were looking up at the colossal figure that blotted out the sky. No one could see his true face clearly. All they could see was a pair of eyes shrouded in nebulae. Those eyes were murky and lifeless, but they still carried the aura of supremacy that looked down on the world. The flames of the way, which could destroy the heavens, were suppressed with a flip of his palm. Suyu was held in his palms, sheltering him. "My people are not to be bullied," he said slowly. His voice was magnificent, and it turned into thousands of thunderbolts that bombarded the north, south, east, and west regions. The forbidden forest, which had existed for an entire era, was blasted apart by the deafening sound of thunder. Many civilizations of the divine manor in the east region were shattered. The holy lands of the Dragon Clan in the south region were split apart. The demons of the north region wailed as if doomsday had arrived. The stars of the west region shattered, and the sleeping Tao Tai woke up with a start. Its huge eyes were filled with deep shock and fear. "He's not dead yet." A majestic figure with an 8-star civilization's ancient array above his head stood at the center of the world. He was like a pillar that held up the heavens, intimidating everyone. He was warning all creatures in the outer realms not to bully his people. Suyu was from a human race, and his identity was obvious. Human, ancestor. In fear, Qing Yun clenched her trembling silver teeth and spoke of the existence that the holy mountain called a nightmare. The strongest ancestor of the last era, the human ancestor. He killed the holy mountain alone, slaughtered 800 million miles of chaos, and killed 3 trillion residents of the chaos. He slaughtered 2 holy mountain heavenly sons and seriously injured one, shocking the Taichu era for hundreds of millions of years. He had clearly fallen. How could he still be alive? Under his protection, Suyu was reborn from the dead. He looked up at the huge and incomparably magnificent figure, feeling the same human bloodline, and his heart was filled with excitement. The human ancestor, the strongest ancestor of the human race in the past, had created an era and created the prosperity of the human race. He was born as a human, and he should be the human ancestor, break the shackles of eternity, and create peace for all ages. Flames, come on. Suyu roared and completely absorbed the last ball of flames that carried the will of destruction of the great path. A strong will of unwillingness and anger came from the unseen world. It indicated that the strangulation of the great path had failed. The 8 balls of flames were all absorbed, and the world became clear and quiet again. However, Suyu could not calm down. His chest was already full of marks of path. A wisp of flames was a line of marks of path. When an ordinary path master broke through, there were only 20 lines of marks of path. However, Suyu had 800 Taoist marks. Those are the marks of path that he had exchanged his life for several times. Finally, I succeeded. Suyu opened his left eye, which was bursting with fierce light. Marks of path open. Swish, swish, swish. A total of 800 marks of path flew out of Suyu's chest and surrounded him. From within the marks of path, an incomparably warm power was released. Among them were the power of the time domain, the power of the space domain, and the power of the other 6 domains. The power of the 8 domains was pure and vigorous, far beyond what it had been before. The power of the life domain appeared, and Suyu's body, which only had his head and half of his chest left, was immediately restored to its original state. However, this was just the beginning. The 8 powers merged into Suyu's body one after another. With a pop, his half-step Pathmaster cultivation finally broke through the bottleneck that he had been stuck in for decades and crossed over to the highest level of the Pathmaster. However, it was not just the Pathmaster. He stepped into the initial Path realm, but it was just the beginning. His cultivation was increasing at an even faster speed. Initial Path realm middle stage, late stage, top stage. Then, like moving clouds and flowing water, he broke through to the early stage of the Forgetting Words realm, then the middle stage and top stage. Moreover, he did not stop, but continued to break through. Fish Dragon realm, Celestial realm, Great Venerable realm. It was not until he reached the middle stage of the Great Venerable realm that the speed of breaking through finally showed signs of slowing down. However, the so-called slow speed was only relative to the previous extremely fast speed. Chapter 24:51. At this moment, the breakthrough stopped. However, the 8 forces were still expanding in Su Yu's body, pushing his cultivation to the limit of the yellow Tao Lord little by little. After the time it takes to burn half an incense stick, his yellow Taoist master's realm could not be any more perfect. However, there was still a trace of surplus in the 8 powers. In the end, his cultivation could no longer withstand such boundless power. The shackles between the major realms were finally broken. A vast and magnificent power of the mysterious way was flowing on the surface of Su Yu's body. Profound Tao energy, that was the absolute power that only Xian Tao Master could possess. It was only then that the 8 waves of energy gradually dissipated and fused with Su Yu's body. He became a mystic Tao Lord in one step. The patriarch of the heaven-splitting patriarch was shocked. This is the effect of absorbing the 8 supreme Taoist flames? It's unheard of. Ancient God Nine Dragon from back then was only this much, no? Qin Yun's eyes were filled with envy. How many Yellow Path Masters have gone through countless years, gone through countless difficulties, and obtained countless opportunities to find the opportunity to break through like Xian Path Master. But Su Yu has reached the heavens in a single step. However, when he recalled all the things that Su Yu had gone through and the many tribulations he had gone through when he broke through to the Pathmaster level, he felt relieved. How could his experiences be any less than those who had broken through to Xian Tao Lord through normal means? As expected of Uncle Su Yu, he managed to become a mysterious Pathmaster in a single step. Huang Fuyi's eyes were filled with admiration. I really hope that such a day will come for me. However, Su Yu's breakthrough did not stop there. His cultivation had stopped growing, but his body was rapidly evolving. The 800 Taoist marks slowly fused into Su Yu's body, and 800 invisible meridians were opened in his body. Those were the meridians through which the power of a Tao Lord circulated. The power of a Tao Lord was too strong, and normal meridians could not withstand it. Only meridians formed from Tao marks could. An ordinary Xian Tao Lord would only have about 400 marks. Su Yu, on the other hand, had 800, which was twice as many as an ordinary Xian Tao Master. This meant that he was able to store even more Tao Lord energy when at the same realm of cultivation, and it was even thicker. If it was just a competition of profound way energy, people of the same realm would not be his match. What followed was a drastic change to his soul. He had also reached the level of Xian Tao Master, and he was even stronger than ordinary Xian Tao Masters. Only then could his breakthrough be considered complete. The human ancestor slowly put Su Yu down. Without saying a word, he walked toward the horizon. Where is the human ancestor going? Huang Fu asked excitedly. Su Yu's eyes were filled with deep respect as he looked at the back of the Rinzhu. He is going to fulfill his unfinished wish. Rinzhu had died a long time ago, but his will did not vanish. Even after so many years had passed, he still carried out the wish he had when he was alive and destroyed the sacred mountain. Now, they should be heading to the sacred mountain, right? Gradually, a thin layer of mist condensed behind the human ancestor and enveloped him. Bit by bit, he disappeared from everyone's sight. Only then did Su Yu retract his gaze. He bowed to Huang Fu Yi, the heaven-splitting ancestor, and Qin Yun. The 3 of you have helped me when I was in trouble. I will definitely repay you in the future. Without the help of the 3 of them, Su Yu would have been buried in the flames of the way. The heaven-splitting ancestor laughed heartily, no longer looking down on Su Yu. Instead, he treated Su Yu as an equal. I'm honored to witness the birth of an upper realm expert with my own eyes. It doesn't matter whether I repay you or not. Qin Yun turned around coldly, walking toward the palace without looking back. She said coldly, "There is no need to repay me. Just treat it as doing a good deed for the other me." She was naturally referring to Xia Jingyu. Su Yu had a complicated expression. He and Qin Yun were supposed to be enemies. He had not expected Qin Yun to be the one to help him at the brink of death. Finally, he looked at the 10-year-old boy. Even though Su Yu had been in danger, It was not difficult for him to sense that the boy was controlling the heavenly law. When he saw the emerald eyeball in his left eye, Suyu immediately recognized it. He asked in surprise, "What's your name?" "Huangfu Yi," he said with a bashful smile, looking at Suyu with a look of admiration. Suyu had mixed feelings. He walked forward and caressed his head. "In the blink of an eye, you've grown up so much. How are your father and mother?" Huangfu's surname was Huangfu. In his left, I was the heavenly law death, I. How could he not know who the child before him was? "Thank you for your concern, Uncle Suyu. My father and mother are very well, and they miss you very much," Huangfu Yi said obediently. Suyu nodded, looking at the heavenly law death, I, in his left eye. "It is fated that you should obtain the heavenly law death, I." He had obtained the 9 jade spiritual pearl for 100 years, but had not grasped its use. When Huangfu Yi was still in his mother's womb, Suyu had inserted the other 9 jade spiritual pearl into his mother's womb. Coincidentally, the heavenly law death I had become a part of Huangfu Yi's body, allowing him to unleash its true power to control the heavenly law. A bitter smile appeared on Suyu's face. However, it was only a trace of helplessness. There were no remains. There were so many treasures in the world. How could he have obtained every single one of them? Moreover, the 9 jade spiritual pearl had helped him suppress the flames of the way. Otherwise, he might not have survived the ordeal. "Uncle Suyu, why did you only open your left eye?" Huangfu Yi looked at Suyu curiously. He had only opened his left eye, but his right eye was tightly shut. Suyu shook his head. "Heavenly secrets cannot be revealed," he said profoundly. Finally, Suyu looked at the place where he had made his breakthrough. A lump of liquid the size of a head was floating in midair. These were all treasures that had been melted by the flames of the way. They had melted into liquid and dripped together, forming a large lump of melted liquid. Among them were the royal dragon sword, the sinful sword, the heaven-destroying rod, and other treasures, not to mention the ancestral dragon's strange feather, the bronze plate, the heavenly law death eye, and other unparalleled treasures. Apart from the divine 9-dragon cauldron and the stone of unknown origin, all of Suyu's life savings had melted. Looking at the lump of liquid before him, he could not help but sigh. In order to break through to the Pathmaster level, he had lost everything. As if he could read Suyu's mind, the heaven-splitting ancestor said, "It's a good thing that you lost it. I noticed that you have been cultivating a lot, but not a lot. Cultivating for a short period of time can make your abilities improve greatly, far surpassing those of the same level. But in the long run, it will be a burden to your cultivation, and you will fall into a disadvantageous position." Suyu humbly accepted the advice. "Thank you for your advice, Elder." The heaven-splitting ancestor was an experienced person, and everything he had experienced and seen was valuable. Suyu naturally had to ponder it seriously. Study the 8 great domains carefully. Even if your future achievements are not as great as the ancient god Jiolong's, you won't be far behind. So, you don't have to waste your energy on other paths. The heaven-splitting ancestor pointed out a bright path for Suyu. Suyu nodded in agreement. Since the breakthrough was over, it was not a good idea to stay here any longer. So, he prepared to leave. "Uncle Suyu, do you want to meet my parents?" Huangfu Yi asked excitedly. Suyu shook his head, his eyes gradually turning cold. "I have some matters to deal with, and I must deal with them. Once I'm free, I will surely pay a visit to your parents." Why had he risked everything to fight for a chance at life and death? It was to kill a man who deserved to die 1,000 times. Chapter 2452. "Okay, I'll wait for you," Huangfu Yi said obediently. Suyu nodded and cleaned up the scene. First, he found the stone that had been sent flying. When this item was suppressing the Tao flame, its peerless power could be seen. In terms of toughness, even the Tao artifacts of the ancient gods could not compare. Moreover, Suyu believed that this stone was not only hard, but its mysteries were still waiting to be discovered by Suyu. The second was to retrieve the divine 9-dragon cauldron. Fortunately, just as the divine 9-dragon cauldron was about to melt, 2 ancient god Tao treasures, the golden Xuanwu and the black phoenix, came to help and shared some of the pressure. Otherwise, the divine nine-dragon cauldron would definitely be destroyed. Since I have survived, I will not let you down. In the future, I will help you regain your glory. Suyu had mastered the 8 great supreme realm. When he held the divine nine-dragon cauldron again, he could feel many differences in the divine nine-dragon cauldron that he had never noticed before. He believed that this was the true power of the divine nine-dragon cauldron. Then, it was the liquid that had merged with many of Su Yu's divine weapons. It was strange. The Tao fire had already receded, but after such a long time, the liquid had not cooled and hardened. Was it because he had fused too many treasures? After giving it some thought, Suyu put it away for the time being. Finally, it was the dying little Qilin and little butterfly in the cocoon. Thank you for your hard work. Suyu stroked the small Kylan's head. Little Qilin's face was filled with hidden bitterness. I don't even have a home anymore. It had always been in the 9 Jade spiritual pearl and had long regarded that place as its home. Suyu smiled without saying a word and clenched his fist. 8 balls of light of different colors converged at his fingertips, forming an 8-colored bead. Not only did the bead form its own space, it also contained the 8 great domains of heaven and earth. Under the nourishment of the 8 domains, all kinds of life forms were born at a speed visible to the naked eye. Birds, beasts, heavenly materials, and earthly treasures, forests, grasslands, spirit veins, everything was available. In just the time it took for a stick of incense to burn, it had evolved into a 3-star civilization. At the sight of this, the patriarch of the heaven-splitting patriarch was astonished. This is what it means to be a master of the 8 domains. With a single action, he can create a heavenly Tao in a 3-star civilization world. In an ordinary cavern world, the creatures inside could only be mortals with low strength. Because the creator couldn't control the soul domain, they couldn't create powerful creatures. However, Suyu was different. With the soul realm in his palm, he could create high-level souls out of thin air. When the other domains converged, they even created high-level environments such as spirit veins, heavenly materials, and earthly treasures. It was something that none of the other Tao Lords could achieve. Little Qilin's heart was filled with fondness, so it quickly brought along Xiao Dai's silkworm cocoon and burrowed inside. Suyu opened his mouth and sucked, then swallowed the pearl. All of a sudden, Suyu shifted his gaze toward the pile of remaining resources in the 9 Jade spiritual pearl. A damaged lotus-like object caught Suyu's attention. That was the lotus seat of misfortune redeeming that was found in the glazed ancient cave. It was found together with the heartless iron hunter. Its purpose was to stop the golden-eyed gentleman's plot. The bad-ridding lotus seat was still there, but the beauty was nowhere to be seen. A trace of sadness echoed in his eyes. Silently sighing, he flicked his finger, and the trouble-traversing lotus flew into the 8-colored pearl in his body. In addition, there was also Sinful Girl's soul crystal core. It was the only thing that could save Yun Yazi, so it had to be kept as well. Everything else was no longer important. Farewell, the two of you. Suyu cupped his fists at the heaven-splitting ancestor and Huangfu Yi, then disappeared from where he was. The space that Suyu was in disappeared as well. That was the space domain. After mastering it, he could cross 1/10 of the outer region with a single step. Although it wasn't as exaggerated as the ancestral dragon, EU's ability to cross an entire region, it was an advantage. With just a thought, Suyu could complete it with the help of the great path of heaven and earth. Of course, Suyu didn't leave the region. Instead, he appeared in the fragment of space above his head. Even the forbidden forest had been completely destroyed by the Renzu's roar, let alone a mere fragment of space. The space turned into thousands of tiny spaces, drifting in all directions like flowing clouds. Qin Xiener was in one of the tiny spaces. Trying to find her would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. But for Suyu, it was no longer difficult. Fate rises and falls. A huge red moon appeared behind Suyu. Under the illumination of the moon, the fates of all things in the world were presented in different colors. Among them, there were 2 long lines of fate that were closely connected to Suyu. Moreover, they came from the same direction. 2. As Suyu pondered, a A starry sky appeared beneath his feet. That was the space domain. Overnight, he appeared at the end of the two lines of fate. Two beautiful figures came into view. One of them was sleeping, while the other was standing straight in front of the sleeping figure, staring straight at Suyu. "It's you." Suyu looked at the masked man in front of him with his left eye. An enormous eye with double pupils appeared behind Suyu's back. This was the soul domain. Under the gaze of the soul domain, Suyu could easily see through the soul under the cover, as well as the soul hidden deeper within it. The veiled woman took off her bamboo hat. Her crystal-like eyes were moist as she stared at Suyu affectionately. She opened her red lips slightly, seemingly excited and joyful. "Suyu, long time no see." Suyu smiled gently. "Luo Shui." The woman in front of him was the saint lady of the wizard clan, Luo Shui, who had been left in the ancient god realm. Her body was occupied by the red dust path master. After leaving the Tao Tai cage, they had never seen each other again. Half a year had passed in a hurry. Suyu did not expect that they would finally meet again. Just as the red dust path master had said before he left, they would meet again sooner or later. Hearing the name Luo Shui, her shoulders trembled with indescribable joy. "How had you been all these years?" "I've been fine." Suyu smiled and looked at her. "What about you?" "I've been fine. With the help of the Red Dust Pathmaster, I've been training in the Colored Glaze civilization," Luo Shui said. Suyu was slightly startled, but then he felt relieved. So we used to be so close. The first person he thought of was the Lady of Destiny in the Bright Palace, who had come with the dream. He did not expect it to be Luo Shui. "You?" Luo Shui was surprised. Suyu smiled and briefly described his experience in the Colored Glaze civilization. Luo Shui was both excited and regretful. All those years, she had been training in isolation. She did not expect that she would miss Suyu. "I still have something important to deal with. If there is a chance, let's meet again." Suyu squatted down and picked up the unconscious Sienna. Seeing this, Luo Shui was stunned. "Who is she?" "My wife," Suyu said slowly. Luo Shui was stunned, and a bitter smile appeared at the corners of her mouth. It was expected. What kind of woman would be willing to be the first to follow Suyu into the Forbidden Forest? They must be more than just friends, right? She even boasted in front of Qin Sienna that she was Suyu's woman. Chapter 2453. Goodbye. Suyu's feet drew a line of stars. He was about to leave. "Wait, I'll go with you." Luo Shui looked straight into Suyu's eyes. After half a year, she had seen through many things. For mortals, if the love between two people lasted for a long time, they would not be together day and night. But for martial artists, no one knew if they would be separated in the next moment or if they would never see each other again. Therefore, grasping every moment was a precious luxury. "You?" Suyu looked at her and said, "I might be in danger if I go." With his current level of cultivation, it was definitely not easy to identify as dangerous. "Then why do you want to bring her along?" Luo Shui pointed at Qin Sienna, who was in Suyu's arms. Suyu said, "I made a promise with her that we would never be separated again, even if there was danger." That was his promise with Sienna. Even if they were to die together, they would never be separated. "Okay, then please bring me along, because I'm not afraid of danger." Luo Shui looked straight at Suyu, her eyes firm and persistent. "If you don't agree, I will stay here forever until you come back." The place they were in was not a safe place. Many holy spirits in the Forbidden Forest had been shaken away by the warning of the human ancestor, fleeing into different small spaces. If she ran into the Holy Spirit King, she would be in danger. "Okay, then follow me." The Star River under Suyu's feet extended and swept Luo Shui away, then disappeared into thin air. In the east region, Divine Manor, Xie Sanren looked at the sky that had become peaceful again, but his heart could not calm down for a long time. His uneasiness did not diminish. Instead, it grew stronger as the world became peaceful again. He pressed his hand against his chest to stop the inexplicable palpitation. He could not understand. Why is this happening? What did I do wrong? Those 6 words of warning made him feel uneasy. At that moment, The space above the East Region Divine Manor suddenly shook, and a star river shrouded it. C.S. Sanrin's heart thumped wildly, as if he had a premonition. He immediately rushed out of the hall, stood in midair, and looked up. In the star river, a figure covered in hazy clouds and mist was looking down from above. The aura on his body was completely restrained, like an ordinary person. However, in evil Sanrin's perception, the other party was like an abyss, unfathomable. "You are?" Evil Sanrin asked. His tone didn't sound evil at all. The man standing on the Milky Way did not say a word. A towering tombstone of death appeared behind him. At the same time, mountains of corpses and seas of blood appeared around the tombstone. "It's you." Seeing the death domain, C.S. Sanrin immediately knew who it was. Suyu said slowly, "I said that I would take your life in 10 days. 7 days have passed since then. You still have 3 days left." Hearing this, the evil Sanrin immediately asked, "Sir, how did I offend you? Please let me know. If I can make it up to you, I will do my best to make it up to you." This was what troubled him the most. 3 more days. Suyu crossed his arms in front of his chest, calmly looking at C.S. Sanrin. He did not respond to any of his questions. In his heart, the evil Sanrin would never be able to make up for the damage he had done to M.O. Qinglong and Qin Xianer, unless he paid with his life. C.S. Sanrin was angry. Anyone would be angry when their life was taken away for no reason and no explanation was given. He had not done anything, so why was he being hunted? However, the other party did not want to negotiate. This left the evil Sanrin with no other choice but to be angry. "I advise you not to go too far," the evil Sanrin coldly warned. He then led a group of semi-living puppets away from the East Region Divine Palace. In order to increase the distance between them, the evil Sanrin used the stone plate. In an instant, he crossed the entire East Region and arrived at the North Region. Taking a deep breath, the evil Sanrin turned his head and said, "I don't think he will be able to catch up to me in such a short time." Slightly relieved, he led a group of semi-living puppets and hid underground. He also concealed all of his aura, trying to hide from the pursuers. A whole day had passed, but the pursuers did not appear. The evil Sanrin felt much better. He probably did not expect me to have the lost stone plate from the last era. Now that we are so far apart, no matter how powerful he is, he won't be able to find me, let alone know where I am hiding. As he thought about this, he laughed at himself and sighed. The older I get, the more timid I become. I was so worried before. It was not a big deal. However, at that moment, a voice came from above his head. 2 more days. To C.S. Sanrin, this voice was like thunder from the heavens. He rushed out of the ground and saw a figure floating in midair, leisurely sipping tea. Beside him, there was a beautiful lady making tea for him. From the looks of it, they had been here for a while. However, because of the mysterious light emitted by the figure, their auras were hidden. The evil Sanrin had no way of knowing. When did you catch up?" The evil Sanrin could not believe it. He had traveled across an entire region. Not only had the other party caught up, but he had also clearly found his location. How is this possible? So he did not say a word. He closed his eyes and sipped his tea. The evil Sanrin clenched his teeth. He did not believe it. Once again, he led the half-living puppet and used the stone plate to leave for the southern region. Not only that, after resting for a while, he used the stone plate again to reach the deepest part of the southern region. If the other party could catch up again, it would be too unbelievable. He still led the half-living puppet and hid underground, constantly paying attention to the outside world. 2 hours passed, 4 hours passed, 6 hours passed. The evil Sanrin had never felt that 2 hours were so long. However, as time passed, there was no sign of the other party catching up, until a whole day had passed. Just as he was about to breathe a sigh of relief, a galaxy appeared in the sky above him. In that galaxy, Suyu sat with his legs crossed. His expression was calm, as if he had been waiting for a long time. 1 more day. The evil Sanrin was so scared that his heart almost broke. He had still been caught up, and so accurately. This should not be happening. How did you do it? The evil Sanrin asked in a stern voice. His eyes were filled with uncontrollable fear. He was sure that he had never had any contact with this person, so it was impossible for him to have been marked. Su Yu did not answer. He just sat quietly and meditated. The evil Sanrin's eyes kept moving. Finally, he looked at the many half-living puppets behind him. He thought to himself, could one of the puppets have been marked by this person? With that thought in mind, the evil Sanrin clenched his teeth. He endured the pain and abandoned all the half-living puppets that he had yet to refine. Compared to his life, these half-living puppets were not worth mentioning. He had used the stone plate to escape alone. This time, he had escaped all the way to the western region. After escaping to the western regions, he continued to flee towards the western regions without stopping at all. He had been on the run for a whole day. He had passed through the sea of constellations, heading toward an even more barren land. Chapter 2454. However, when the day was up, a nightmarish voice sounded in his ears. Time's up. Die. The evil Sanrin turned his head and saw a figure slowly standing up in a galaxy far away. The galaxy around him moved, sweeping through all the space in his sight. At this moment, the evil Sanrin's heart collapsed. He shouted, "What grudge do you have against me? Why are you chasing after me like this?" So he did not answer. He just casually waved his hand in the air. A death tombstone crashed toward him. Perhaps it was because he was close to death, but the evil Sanrin had someone to fight back. "I'm not afraid of you." As he roared, he released his own domain, trying to fight back against the death domain. However, when the two domains collided, the evil Sanrin's domain was immediately dyed black by the death tombstone. It was destroyed immediately. The evil Sanrin, whose mind was connected, groaned and spat out a mouthful of blood. His eyes flickered with intense shock. Both of them were at the level of Xiandao Master. However, the difference in their domains was too great. The death tombstone did not slow down. It was about to kill the evil Sanrin. The courage he had to fight back disappeared. He hurriedly activated the stone plate and chose to escape. With one leap, he left the west region and returned to the east region. However, before he could wait for the stone plate to be filled up again, the galaxy above his head descended again. The evil Sanrin's black hair was scattered. There was blood at the corner of his mouth. His face was weak and full of vicissitudes. Looking up at the galaxy, the evil Sanrin clenched his teeth and desperately activated the stone plate again. When the death tombstone came, he escaped again. However, as soon as he escaped, he was caught up by that person before he had time to recover. Just like that, he was in danger again and again. He escaped death again and again. This repeated for 10 times. As the evil Sanrin's energy consumption increased, he could not replenish it. He could no longer activate the stone plate. The last time he escaped, he ran all the way to the East Pole Market. Thump! The light from the stone plate dissipated. The evil Sanrin fell out, exhausted. He did not even have the strength to stand. His whole body swayed, as if he was about to fall. He no longer had the strength to activate the stone plate. He could only wait where he was in despair. That river of stars didn't escape like he did by luck. Instead, it caught up to him unhurriedly. Looking at the blurry figure in the Milky Way, the evil wanderer laid on the ground helplessly. He smiled bitterly and said, "Are you satisfied with my sorry state? Is that what you want to see?" He was not a fool. His opponent had been able to kill him many times, but had deliberately allowed him to escape. But he caught up again and again. What kind of abuse was the cruelest? That was to give people hope and then use their feet to crush it bit by bit, letting people taste the joy of escaping and the pain of despair back and forth. And he had experienced it more than 10 times. The torment and pain in his heart caused him to be on the verge of insanity. The figure in the galaxy finally responded for the first time. "Isn't what I'm doing the way you like the most?" Back then, Mo Qinglong and Su Yu had managed to escape from the Dragon Emperor's demonic claws with great difficulty. Not only that, but he had also indirectly helped Xie Sanrin achieve his long-cherished wish. But what about evil Sanrin? He did not expect him to repay Su Yu and Mo Qinglong, but only hoped that he would not disturb them. But how'd he do it? He left a chance for one of them to survive, so that one of them had to die. He tested their humanity and made them face torture. Not only that, But he also forced Suyu into a desperate situation at the most crucial moment, and even tried to kill Qin Xiener to satisfy his sadistic desire. Now, what Suyu was doing was repaying him 100-fold in his favorite way. He must have enjoyed the feeling of being toyed with in the palm of someone else's hand. Who are you? I don't remember offending someone like you. The evil Sanren was stunned, and his heart was filled with confusion. How could he offend someone who had mastered the realm of death? It was impossible. There must have been a misunderstanding between them. Thinking of this, the evil Sanren found a new hope of survival. Suyu waved his sleeves, and the galaxy of stars in the sky dissipated. The light around him flowed with the wind, revealing his true appearance. A pair of cold eyes reflected the cold light, penetrating deep into the evil Sanren's heart. Use your eyes to look at me again. Who? I? Suyu said coldly. Seeing that face clearly, the evil Sanren looked as if he had seen a ghost. Suyu? He rubbed his eyes, unable to believe what he was seeing. With his long life and experience, rubbing his eyes was a childish and frivolous action that did not match his age. However, at this moment, it was really happening. That was because he was too shocked. He was even more shocked than when he had been ordered by a death master. Anyone could have chased after him, but it could not have been Suyu. Putting aside the fact that he had already died under the light ball that could melt everything, Suyu's previous cultivation level alone could not have been the super strong man who had chased him to the ends of the earth. What was Suyu's cultivation level? Half-Path Master. Even with Mo Qinglong's cultivation level, he was only at the middle stage of the Great Venerable Realm. What was the cultivation level of the person in front of him? Path Master Xian. The difference between the two was not just one level, but an entire yellow Path Master level. How could a living being skip the yellow Downlord realm from the half-step Downlord realm to the profound Downlord realm? As you can see, Suyu said coldly, it is a pity that I did not die in the Forbidden Forest as you wished. After confirming that it was Suyu, the evil Sanren's chest heaved up and down. He could not describe his inner emotions. At that time, he had only done it on a whim and wanted to tease this demon-like, intelligent human. He was like a deity teasing a slightly smarter ant for fun. He swore that he had no intention of deliberately attacking Suyu. Suyu, allow me to say a few words. The evil Sanren sorted out his thoughts. I admit that I was wrong, but I am willing to do everything in my power to make up for it. Seeing that Suyu's expression was not right, he hurriedly said, for example, I know that there are several channels leading to the 8-star civilizations outside this area. It's just that ordinary people do not know about them. Suyu was indifferent. You don't have to tell me. I know. After all, it was just a huge formation that isolated the outside world. Since it was a formation, there must be a flaw. The only way in and out was not through the gap that appeared when the 8-star civilizations recruited. Otherwise, how could Prince Xiaoyao, Qin Yun, the sinful lady, and other people from higher civilizations come to the outside world? Then what do you want? Just say it. If I have it, I will give it to you, the evil Sanren said. He thought to himself that he could just give that thing to Suyu. However, Suyu's reply made his heart turn cold. Chapter 2455. He didn't know if he could save Mo Qinglong's life. But before that, he had to take evil Sanren's life. Suyu, don't go too far. Evil Sanren suddenly took out a token from his sleeve. The token had an ancient design and had a mysterious rhythm to it. In fact, there was even some power that surpassed the Xiandao masters. With a single glance, one could tell that it was no ordinary item. If you don't know what this is, I can tell you that this is the token of the space-time ruler of an 8-star civilization. I've obtained his token, so I'm his man. If you don't want me trapped in the space-time crack forever and die without a burial, you can kill me. The evil Sanren threatened fiercely. Since Suyu was determined to kill him, he would go all out. When the 8-star civilization's recruitment emissary saw this token, he had left without saying anything because he knew that this token was extraordinary. The space-time master, Suyu murmured. Evil Sanren raised his voice. That's right. This was the space-time dominus. An unparalleled almighty who controlled both the time and space domains. The entire domain added up wouldn't even be enough for him to crush it with a single finger. If you want to kill me, you must be mentally prepared to become enemies with the space-time dominus. Suyu's shoulders trembled slightly. The Sanren thought Suyu was afraid, so he snorted. If you stop now, I can let bygones be bygones and not report this to the space-time master. However, when Suyu looked at him, an hourglass and a galaxy appeared behind him at the same time. The two interweaved together. In the river of stars, the sun, moon, and stars would sometimes reverse, sometimes accelerate, and sometimes freeze. The changes were dazzling and dazzling. Near the intertwined images, the space and time of heaven and earth were clearly in a state of intense chaos. Time and space. Domain? The evil Sanren gasped. He pointed at Suyu and said in a trembling voice, You actually know. Suyu's eyes narrowed, and the space-time domain around him vanished. The light receded, revealing her cold eyes. The space-time sovereign? I really want to meet him, Suyu said calmly. He had once imagined that perhaps he and ancient God-9 Dragon were the only people in the world who had grasped the domains of the Eight Supremes. However, they weren't the only ones who had grasped one or two sovereign domains. Unexpectedly, there really was a so-called space-time dominator. He couldn't help but want to compete with him. Human, don't seek your own death. The space-time dominator's cultivation base is something an ant like you will never be able to forget. If he wants to kill you, he can do it in the blink of an eye. Evil Sanren threatened. Suyu's eyes were as calm as still water. I can kill you in the blink of an eye. Suyu had already made up his mind to kill him, and he slammed the death tombstone down on his head. With a heart-wrenching scream, the evil Sanren could not fight back and was suppressed by the tombstone. His body started to decay at an extremely fast speed, and he died. Even his soul was annihilated. Suyu, you will regret this. You will regret this. Before he died, the evil Sanren let out a venomous roar. Suyu's gaze was calm as he watched Sanren turn into ashes. Then, with a ding sound, a token and a ring fell from the ashes. With a shift of Suyu's mind, the two objects were transported by space and floated 3 feet in front of him. He gave the token a cursory glance. However, he took another look at the ring. With his current eyesight, he could see through everything in the world. Even that token, in his eyes, the internal structure and the aura it contained couldn't hide from him. The only thing he could not see through was the ring in front of him. It is not an ordinary item, Suyu said softly as he stored it in his space storage device. Looking at the ashes that the evil Sanren had turned into, Suyu's obsession dissipated. At least I have avenged you, Suyu muttered, his body glowing with an emerald light. A giant, emerald ancient tree that connected the heavens and the earth stood majestically. A cool breeze blew past, and a wave of emerald light fell from the sky, stopping beneath Suyu's feet. Looking at the wave of emerald light, it was a seed. Without any watering, the seed had taken root, sprouted, and grown. Finally, a pink flower as tall as a human bloomed on the branch. With a popping sound, the flower bloomed. A flawless, white jade body lay quietly within it. That was Mo Qingdao in her teenage years. She was completely naked, lying there as if she was in a deep sleep. Her breathing was even and long. Suyu felt as if a huge rock had been lifted from his heart. After thinking for a moment, he opened his mouth and spat out a black orb that had been hidden within his body. The orb was filled with thick, demonic energy. It was Mo Qingdao's demonic orb of destiny. It has been returned to its rightful owner. Suyu placed it by her ear and waved with a smile. Take care. Without hesitation, he stepped on the Milky Way and left with Luo Shuei. The cool breeze that had left blew past her smooth body, causing her to subconsciously shrink as she slowly woke up. She sat up in a daze and looked at her unharmed body. She murmured in confusion, I should have perished in this world, right? At the level of great venerable, one's memory before death was very clear. She remembered very clearly that she had swallowed the Dragon Emperor's mark on Suyu's body and had been gradually devoured by the mark. But why did she not die? Was it all a dream? But when did the dream begin? Was that human named Suyu also a person in the dream? Suddenly, she felt a chill on the back of her hand. Looking down, she saw a pitch-black orb rolling on her back. The demonic orb of destiny. Mo Qingdao looked up abruptly, his heart filled with indescribable excitement. It's not a dream, it's not. He remembered giving the demonic orb of destiny to Suyu before he died. The return of the demonic orb meant that it was not a dream. Suyu, Mo Qinglong shouted, but the only reply he got was the endless silence of the horizon. In the East region, Divine Manor, Suyu stood above the Azure Dragon civilization. With a wave of his hand, nearly 10,000 half-living puppets were released. He collected all the puppets that Xie Sanren had thrown away. Among them were many people he was familiar with, such as Xia Yan of the Seven Unparalleled Civilizations, Xian Hua and Bright Jade of the Colored Glaze Civilization, and others. Reincarnation. Suyu put his palms together, and 6 giant, 6-colored gates appeared behind him. The 6 giant gates opened one by one, and there was a vortex in each of them. The remnant souls that occupied the many strong men present left their bodies under the call of the 6 paths of reincarnation, entering their respective gates of reincarnation and disappearing from this world. As the remnant souls dispersed, the strong men gradually regained control of their bodies with their own consciousnesses. Everyone's emotions were still lingering in the shock and anger of being controlled. Once they were free, they subconsciously attacked their surroundings. They gathered together, and once they attacked individually, the consequences would be unimaginable. The Tao marks in Su Yu's body revolved, and the majestic Xian Dea Master's power began to circulate. Waves of Xian Dea Master's power overwhelmed the entire area, including the strongest divine flame demonic woman, the green and white twin dragons, demonic Jingang, and others. They were all suppressed to the ground. Under that kind of pressure, it was difficult for their bodies to move, let alone attack. Xian Dao Master? All the divine experts present were horrified. They subconsciously thought that it was Xie Sanren. Chapter 2456. Suyu, Suyu, it's Suyu. Exclamations of astonishment rose and fell one after another, sweeping through the surroundings like a tsunami. They couldn't believe it was Suyu who emitted the power of the Xian Dao Master. If they remember correctly, Suyu was only a half-step Dao Master. Xie Sanren is dead. Everyone, you may leave. Suyu waved his hand, and Qin Hui and the other teachers were teleported out. Let's go. Suyu landed silently in the Azure Dragon civilization without looking back. Qin Hui and the other teachers were shocked and followed closely behind him. They returned to the Azure Dragon civilization. The experts on one side were bewildered as they discussed intensely. They only discussed one thing. How did Suyu become the Xian Dao Master? Most of the strong fighters chose to leave as soon as possible after some hesitation. Everything that had happened was too terrifying, and it left an indelible psychological shadow in their hearts. Only a few chose to stay. In the Azure Dragon civilization, with Qin Hui and the other teachers and Luo Shui, Suyu enjoyed peace. He stood in front of a mountain. The ancient tree behind him slowly faded away. A desolate expression flashed across his eyes. Brother Suyu, this is the 10th attempt. Perhaps it is, as the heaven-splitting ancestor said, that the descendants of the ancient gods can't be resurrected. Behind him, Qin Xianer hugged him from behind, comforting him with a warm hug. Suyu sighed. Even if the path of the law of life transformed into a domain, it still couldn't save the heartless Iron Hunter. A lingering sadness was imprinted in the depths of his heart. Brother Suyu, you should live well for her. Only then will you live up to her sacrifice, Qin Xianer said softly, her eyes filled with gratitude. She didn't know what position the heartless Iron Hunter had in Suyu's heart, but she knew that without her, she would only be able to hug a mass of air. I understand. Suyu held Xianer's small hand, feeling a sense of relief. He had been in the Azure Dragon civilization for a few days, and he had already healed Xianer's body. The two of them stayed together in the Azure Dragon civilization for a few days. Brother Suyu, Let's live in seclusion and never ask about the world again, okay? Qin Sienna rested her forehead on Su Yu's back, enjoying the tranquil and happy life. Su Yu's heart was moved, and he turned around to look at Qin Sienna's beautiful face. Sienna felt a strange feeling in her heart, and she pursed her lips and hugged Su Yu tightly. Her voice was as soft as a mosquito's as she said, "Brother Su Yu, don't speak," Su Yu said softly. With a move of his heart, a multicolored light fog engulfed the mountains and rivers, isolating them from the outside world. It seemed like Sienna knew what was about to happen, so she became nervous and her body stiffened. "Brother Su Yu, I'm afraid." Su Yu's movements were gentle, and he slowly removed Sienna's defenses. In the end, only two natural bodies were left, facing each other. "Thank you for coming late to the bridal chamber," Su Yu said softly as he stroked Sienna's cheek. Sienna was extremely shy. She lowered her head and fell into Su Yu's arms. A night of romance. Sienna, curled up in exhaustion, still immersed in the happiness of being a woman yesterday. Su Yu, who was beside her, had already disappeared. Outside, the Azure Dragon civilization. Beside him, Luo Shui was visibly moved. "Su Yu, are you really going to abandon her?" Su Yu's clothes were neat and tidy, just like when he was young. He shook his head lightly. "I'm not abandoning her. I'm protecting her." His eyes were piercing into the heavens, and they gradually became fierce. How could he forget that when he was absorbing the flames of the way, there was a powerful and extraordinary force that sent the stone suppressing the flames of the way flying? Su Yu, who could have succeeded, almost fell into a state of eternal damnation. Why did he tell Luo Shui that this trip would be dangerous? To him, the serene was not dangerous at all. The dangerous one was the person who had yet to emerge from the water. That person's cultivation was at least that of a Xian Pathmaster. That was someone Su Yu had to be careful with. "Shui, promise me that if I don't come back within a month, you will bring Sienna to this place immediately. There will be someone there to help you leave the outer world." Su Yu handed the serene stone plate to Luo Shui. The stone plate was imbued with Su Yu's Xian Path energy, so it could be activated at any time. Luo Shui shook his head. "Didn't you promise Qin Sienna that you would never be separated? What are you doing now?" Su Yu's eyes were filled with a glimmer of hope. "I haven't broken my promise, because Sienna's belly will soon have the blood of both of us. As long as it exists, I exist." After a night of lovemaking, they had already planted the seed of their love. Once the time was right, it would be born. If it was just Sienna, he could bring Sienna along with him. But she still had their child in her belly. Therefore, Su Yu had to go alone. Luo Shui's throat seemed to be blocked by something, and she could not speak for a moment. "It's finally time to get rid of you." Su Yu squeezed her hand and left. The Milky Way beneath his feet flashed, and he disappeared from the divine manor of the East region, arriving at the North region. He sat on the peak of a snowy mountain, a huge moon hanging behind him. "Let me see who is behind all this." The huge moon emitted a light that shone upon the outer world. Threads of fate hidden in the darkness slowly emerged. There were tens of thousands of these threads of fate. Each thread of fate meant that a person's fate was connected to Su Yu's. Most of the threads of fate were stable and kind. Only the 13 lines of fate were intermittent and filled with darkness. Those were the threads of fate that formed naturally between Su Yu and those who had a life-and-death feud with him. Su Yu grabbed the 13 threads of fate, and the darkness in his left eye swirled. The word death was faintly discernible in his eye, killing curse across space. The word death in Su Yu's left eye split into 13, and they sped along the threads of fate to the other end of the thread, in the 7 unique civilizations. In the secret chamber of the second peerless family, Emperor Pujuan's face was gloomy. He was dressed in mourning clothes, and in front of him was the memorial tablet of his son, the Greedy Wolf King. A few days ago, the Greedy Wolf King's life tablet had shattered, indicating that his life had come to an end. "Son, you must have died very unwillingly, right? If the lucky bead was still here, how could you have died?" Emperor Pujuan's eyes were filled with hatred. "As your father, I will kill everyone related to Su Rushu to avenge you. He did not know how the greedy Wolf King died, but he blamed Su Yu. The greedy Wolf King's life had been smooth until he met Su Yu, and his fate took a turn for the worse. In his opinion, it was not an exaggeration to say that Su Yu had indirectly killed the greedy Wolf King. Master, we have obtained some information from the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Su Rushu is likely to have come from a six-star civilization. There's an organization he created there, the Cauldron. Emperor Pajuan stood up slowly and said ferociously, "Summon all the experts in the family and send troops to the six-star civilization. Kill everyone in the Cauldron." Yes. The guest bowed. When he raised his head, he said in surprise, "Master, why is there a word death on your forehead?" Huh? Emperor Pajuan frowned. What nonsense are you talking about? Chapter 2457. In his field of vision, the word death gradually expanded, spreading to his entire face. It made the Emperor of Pajuan's face turn pitch black, like dead ashes. Moreover, wisps of death aura were being emitted from his face, which was extremely eerie. The Emperor of Pajuan finally sensed that something was wrong. He raised his hand and created a mirror in front of him, reflecting his face at the moment. In the mirror, there was no face, only the word death. Moreover, his face was rapidly decaying into dust, and the flesh on his face was like dried and cracked wall skin, peeling off piece by piece. In shock, the Emperor of Pajuan screamed in horror, hurriedly expelling the word death from his face with his primitive power. Unfortunately, the power of the word death was far beyond what he could resist. Not long after, the Emperor of Pajuan screamed miserably, and under the gaze of the guest, he gradually turned into a pile of black ashes. The whole process from beginning to end only lasted for 10 breaths. The guest witnessed the whole process, and he could not help but tremble in fear. He could not help but touch his face, fearing that the eerie word death would also appear on his face. Guest-chun, what should we do? The other guests heard the noise and came over, only to see the pile of ashes that the master of Pajuan had turned into. Guest-chun said with lingering fear, "What else can we do? Let's go our separate ways." Right after the death of the young master, the master of Pajuan died mysteriously. The second peerless family only existed in name. If they did not leave now, when the other forces came, they would all become captives of others. As for the order that the Emperor of Pajuan had given before his death, of course, no one cared. Not long after, the whole second peerless family was in a mess, and the strong men of the vassal families scattered like birds and beasts. On the other side, the South Pole immortal Wang escaped the fate of being turned into a half-living puppet. He led Tai Bufan and a group of disciples to the central region of the North, South, East, and West regions. Along the way, the disciples all had different expressions. "Master, is that Xiandao Master Su Yu really the Su Yu who was our enemy before?" Tai Bufan frowned, unable to accept the fact. In the West regions, he thought he was the best. However, Su Yu, who was also from the West regions, had achievements that he could only look up to for the rest of his life. The South Pole immortal Wang's face was filled with shock that could not be erased. He nodded deeply. "It should be him. I really didn't expect him to become the Xiandao Master." Several disciples, including senior sister Yuan and the others, had ugly expressions on their faces. They had offended Su Yu and Xiandao Master before. If he pursued the matter, who would be spared? What are you afraid of? However, there was a disciple who was not afraid. He said, "He has only just broken through to Xiandao Master. How could a mere Su Yu compare to the person we're going to rely on?" He was Hai Qin Xiao, who had been pestering Qin Xiener. He had overestimated his own abilities and had come to find trouble with Su Yu. As a result, he had been imprisoned in a latrine pit by Su Yu and had a bad reputation. Even now, he still didn't feel that he had done anything wrong, and he still held a grudge against Su Yu. The disciples who were in the know were immediately relieved. Indeed, if they could succeed in this trip, they wouldn't need to fear Su Yu. But junior sister Qin has been taken away by Su Yu. How can we rely on that, Lord? Tai Bufan looked at the South Pole Fairy Wang and asked for his opinion. The South Pole Fairy Wung sighed solemnly. I had planned to wait for the 8-star civilization recruitment to end before offering Qin Sienner to that lord in exchange for the South Sea civilization's collective entry into the 8-star civilization. What we can do now is to inform that lord about Qin Sienner. I believe he will ask Su Yu for Qin Sienner himself. Hai Qingxiao's eyes were filled with resentment. Humph! When that lord makes his move, Su Yu will definitely die. When that time comes, I want to see how he can still be so arrogant. He was viciously guessing, but he suddenly realized that a group of people, including the South Pole Fairy Wang and the others, were all looking at him with a hint of fear in their eyes. Master, senior brother, what are you looking at? Hai Qingxiao was a little stunned, not understanding the meaning of their gazes. Back off. The South Pole Fairy Wang swung his sleeves fiercely, sending all the disciples flying away from Hai Qingxiao. He also hurriedly distanced himself. Hai Qingxiao thought that there was danger behind him, and he hurriedly ran toward the South Pole Fairy Wang to seek safety. However, the South Pole Fairy Wang sternly rebuked him. Don't come over. As he spoke, he did not hesitate to display the realm, preparing to kill Hai Qingxiao. Hai Qingxiao stopped in his tracks, inexplicably panicked, and said, Master, senior brother, what's wrong with you? At that moment, senior sister Yuan's beautiful eyes widened, and she pointed her trembling index finger at him, saying, Junior brother Hai, your face. My face. Hai Qingxiao was stunned, and a mass of light mist condensed on his palm, shining on his own face. A face that was rapidly decaying and turning into ashes came into view. Ah, what is this, master? Save me. Hai Qingxiao was scared out of his wits, and he hurriedly ran toward the South Pole Fairy Wang. However, as he ran, his body was decaying and turning into dust. When he reached the South Pole Fairy Wang, all that was left was a pile of ashes. Witnessing such a bizarre scene with their own eyes, everyone present felt their scalps go numb. In a situation where no one attacked, Hai Qingxiao died as soon as he said he would, and he died in an extremely cruel way. Master, what is going on? Tai Bufan asked, his teeth chattering. The South Pole Fairy Wang shook his old head, indicating that he did not know. Senior sister Yuan anxiously guessed. Could it be because of Su Yu? Just now, Hai Qingxiao's discussion about Su Yu was the most intense. Moreover, right after the discussion, the word death immediately appeared on his face. This is impossible, right? Even if Master Xian wanted to kill someone, how could he do it from such a distance? Tai Bufan expressed his doubts. The South Pole Fairy Wing also did not believe that the evil wanderer was Master Xian, but he had never seen him kill someone from such a distance. Calm down. Don't scare yourself to death. The South Pole Fairy Wang comforted the crowd, saying, Let's continue with the plan. The plan was to continue betraying Qin Sienner in exchange for their own benefits. However, almost as soon as he finished speaking, Senior Sister Yuan, Tai Bufan, and the others distanced themselves from the South Pole Fairy Wang with faces full of panic, shouting in horror, Master, your face. His face was exactly the same as Hai Qingxiao's. An extremely clear word, death, appeared on his face. The South Pole Fairy Wang's heart thumped, as if he had fallen into a boundless abyss. He trembled as he looked at his own face, and his face instantly turned deathly pale. No! As he roared in disbelief, his body decayed bit by bit until it turned into ashes. Master! The crowd of disciples wailed, their hearts filled with fear and sorrow. They did not even know who the enemy was, yet someone as powerful as their master had died, just like that. However, they soon realized that they might not even have the chance to grieve, because the word death appeared on the bodies of many of the disciples present one after another. Chapter 2458. 5 minutes later, except for a few disciples who knew nothing about Qin Sienner, the rest were all dead. At the same time, the same scene was happening in every corner of the outer region. All of Su Yu's former enemies, no matter where they were, no matter how well they hid, died suddenly on the snowy peak of the northern region. The 13 threads of fate in Su Yu's hand broke one after another. Breaking meant that the owner of the other end of the thread had died. His killing curse contained the domain of death. There were only a few people in the outer region who could withstand it. The 13 threads of fate were broken one by one. Until the last thread, it was as stable as before, unaffected. There was only one reason. The person on the other end ignored his killing curse. As for the person who was able to send the stone flying within the Tao flames, his strength was definitely not weak. Suyu held the thread of fate tightly and stood up slowly. His eyes were filled with an ice-cold light as he said, "Found you." The Star River flowed under his feet. He followed the thread of fate and crossed it in an instant. He crossed 1/10 of the region at once, but the thread of fate was still extending. He crossed another 1/10 of the region, but the thread of fate was still far away. Again and again, he could clearly feel that the closer he got, the more distance the other party would widen. They were constantly on the run. It seemed that the other party had noticed Suyu's chase. The other party didn't stop until Suyu crossed the border of the 4 regions. Suyu looked up and saw a giant self-rotating cloud firmly occupying the center of the border of the 4 regions. He believed that every living being from a 7-star civilization would know where this place was. It was the Xiandao Palace, the powerful being that ruled all 7-star civilizations. He rarely showed up, only when there was a huge change. The last time the Xiandao Palace showed up was half a century ago. That time, the Taotai suddenly broke into the outer region and caused endless slaughter and destruction. The Xiandao Palace had to show up to deal with the outer region that was on the verge of destruction. After that, the Xiandao Palace never showed up again. Normally, no one would care about the Xiandao Palace, but no one would ignore its existence, because it was the most powerful force in the entire outer region. Rumor had it that the weakest member of the Xiandao Palace could defeat all the leaders of the outer region. Needless to say, the palace masters among them were definitely unrivaled powerhouses. However, the mysterious Tao Palace, which had never interfered with the affairs of the world, had interfered with Su Yu's absorption of the Tao flame. Moreover, they had almost succeeded in their plot and caused his death. If not for the human ancestors' intervention, he would have been annihilated. The mysterious Tao Palace. Su Yu's eyes were as cold as ice. He was slightly surprised, but he had expected it. Apart from the people from the Xiandao Palace, who else had the ability to interfere? With a slight stomp, Su Yu strode toward the mysterious Tao Palace. If he didn't get rid of the person who plotted against him, he would definitely be a source of trouble in the future. There were too many of his family and friends in the Outer Realms. If he were to leave the Outer Realm one day and leave behind such a formidable enemy in the world, then the consequences were obvious. Therefore, since he had chosen to be Su Yu's enemy, he had to be prepared to be destroyed. However, when Su Yu was 100 million miles away from the mysterious Tao Palace, his figure was suddenly blocked. A viscous energy barrier appeared in front of Su Yu. The energy shield was covered with profound talismans that blocked all the powerful enemies outside. It was so powerful that no one below the Xiandao Master could break it. This was also the reason why the mysterious Tao Palace could remain undisturbed for 10,000 years. Even if ordinary creatures wanted to enter the mysterious Tao Palace, they would not have a chance. Break! Su Yu gathered the mysterious path power in his palm and pressed it against the energy shield. With a cracking sound, the energy shield was shattered on the spot. Inside the mysterious Tao Palace, in front of the silent ancient tower, 3 old men with white hair and beards were meditating with their eyes closed. Suddenly, the old man on the left, who was dressed in a purple robe, opened his eyes slowly. There were many black shadows in his eyes. He said slowly, "Someone broke through the great formation of 10,000 domains." The old man on the right, who was dressed in a green robe, closed his eyes and said in a hoarse voice, "Is a Xiandao master who recently broke through and wants to join us? Don't worry about it. Wait until he breaks through the 1,000 domains." The old man in the purple robe agreed. It should be so. If he wants to join our mysterious Tao Palace, if he can't even break through the 1,000 domains, then there is no need for him to join us. Although the two of them had not reached the outside world to observe, they clearly understood everything that was happening outside. in front of the energy shield. Su frowned slightly. Although the energy shield was broken, he found that it was only the outermost layer. Every 10,000 li further in, there would be an even more powerful energy barrier. There were more than 10,000 layers of them. The great formation of 10,000 paths. Su said lightly. Looking forward, Su opened all 800 down marks in his body, and all the mysterious path power was gathered in his index finger. Break again. With a point of his finger, a magnificent, mysterious path power like a giant dragon suddenly broke through 100 layers of energy shields. In front of the ancient tower, the two old men in the purple robe and red robe were slightly surprised. Breaking through 100 layers in a breath. If the opponent is just using the mysterious path power, then it is a little different. Indeed, the Xiandao master who has just broken through should not have such a strong, mysterious path power. He must have used some kind of technique like a domain or a Dao artifact. If that is the case, then it is only SOSO. The old man in the purple robe shook his head. Suyu stepped forward for 1,000,000 miles and looked at the dense energy shields in front of him. He said lightly, "If we continue to break through like this, it will be a little slow." A giant hourglass appeared behind him. The sand in it suddenly began to drip faster. With Suyu as the center, time within 1,000,000 miles passed at a shocking speed, reaching the speed of 10,000 years in an instant. 1,000 layers of energy shields, after suddenly passing through 1,000 years, did not have time to be replenished by the core of the formation. They lost their energy and immediately collapsed. The two old men in front of the ancient tower were both shocked. 1,000 layers in a breath. Could it be an old monster who has cultivated for a very long time? In our palace, there are only 10 people who can break through 1,000 layers in a breath. Don't rush to a conclusion. Maybe this person is just using some extreme techniques and will not last long. It was as if he was responding to their words. With a loud bang, 1,000 layers of energy shields were broken again. The old man in the red robe was shocked. He said, "According to the rules of the Xiandao Palace, if 1,000 layers of energy shields are broken in a breath, the two of us can come out and meet him. Should we? Not for now." The old man in the purple robe stopped cultivating completely. He said, "Using extreme techniques to break through 1,000 layers of energy shields is not worth mentioning. It is not worth our meeting." Boom! With another loud bang, another 1,000 layers of energy shields were broken. It happened 3 times in a row. Even the old man in the purple robe was shocked. Could it be that the person who came was really a Xiandao master who had cultivated for a long time? Let's wait and see. The old man in the purple robe still insisted. Before the deafening sound subsided, another deafening explosion rang out. Chapter 2459. Let's go and take a look. The purple-robed elder was shocked. He left the ancient tower with the red-robed elder and came to the Xiandao Palace. Through the last 2,000 layers of energy, the two elders could clearly see the newcomer. It was a young, silver-haired human. Behind him, a giant palm that blotted out the sun slowly dissipated. The palm was filled with a thick aura of fortune. It was extremely mysterious. The creation realm? The two elders looked at each other and saw the shock in each other's eyes. The creation realm was one of the 8 great supreme realms. However, no one from the outside world had ever mastered it. The human in front of them was a supreme realm master. What was even more unbelievable was that he was no more than 150 years old. "You are the one who came to see us." Although the purple-robed elder was surprised, he still had to maintain his dignity as a member of the Xiandao Palace. Suyu walked forward slowly and looked at the 2,000 energy shields in front of him. He then looked at the 2 elders in front of him. Finally, he looked down at the string of fate in his hand. The person on the other side of the string of fate was not either of them. "I'm not here to see you. I am here to look for someone," Suyu said calmly. The 2 elders frowned. Who could look for someone from the Xiandao Palace? The purple-robed elder clasped his hands behind his back and said with a serious face, "Human, if you want to join the Xiandao Palace, not only do you have to break through the energy barrier, you also have to show the most basic respect. If you have such an attitude, we will not let you in." The red-robed elder nodded and pointed to the last 2,000 layers of energy barrier. Do you see that? There's a praying mat under each layer of energy barrier. You can only break through it after you kneel 3 times and count down 9 times. This is to show your attitude. So you looked over. Indeed, there was a praying mat under each of the 2,000 energy barriers. If each of them had to kneel 3 times and count down 9 times, they would have to kneel 6,000 times and count out 18,000 times. This was to purposely erase the arrogance of those who joined the Xiandao Palace and make them respect them. After all, anyone who could become the master of the Xiandao Palace was a supreme overlord in the world. It was inevitable that they would be arrogant. Using this to erase one's arrogance could be considered a method. However, Su Yu's gaze gradually became cold. I repeat, I didn't come here to meet anyone, nor did I come here to join anyone. I came here to look for someone. The 2 elders finally understood Su Yu's intentions. They furrowed their brows and asked, "Since you didn't come here to seek an audience, nor did you come here to join the mysterious Dao Palace, then why did you come here?" Su Yu shook his head. He could not be bothered to explain further. He said, "Move aside. I am about to break the energy barrier." It was only then that the 2 elders realized that Su Yu had come with ill intentions. No one had ever dared to provoke the mysterious Dao Palace since its inception. Therefore, for a moment, the 2 old men did not understand. At this moment, he suddenly understood. "You really don't know what you're talking about." The purple-robed old man laughed angrily and said angrily, "Get lost right now, or I'll annihilate you." The red-robed elder did not have a good attitude either. He flung his sleeves and harumphed. "You dare to provoke the mysterious Dao Palace? Really?" Su Yu's gaze turned cold, and without another word, he took out the divine 9-dragon cauldron. In the past, when he was a half-step Dao Lord, Su Yu found it difficult to control it, even with the human ancestors' cauldron controlling technique. Now that he was the master of the mysterious Dao Palace, he was much more relaxed. Divine 9-dragon cauldron, break. All of a sudden, the divine 9-dragon cauldron shone brightly and turned into a rotating circle of 9-colored light. A series of deafening roars could be heard. 2,000 energy barriers were all shattered on the spot. The boundless energy waves generated by the explosions set off a huge gale. The clothes of the purple-robed and red-robed elders fluttered wildly, and they almost lost their balance. Their hair was messy, and their robes were disheveled. They were in a sorry state. "Divine 9-dragon cauldron? Who are you?" The purple-robed elder asked in shock. He could not care less about his image. The red-robed elder's face was also filled with shock. He asked in disbelief, "Are you the descendant of the ancient god Jiulong?" The divine 9-dragon cauldron could only be controlled by the descendant of the ancient god Jiulong. Su Yu had destroyed 2,000 energy barriers in a single breath. In the mysterious Dao Palace, only the master of the mysterious Dao Palace, who was ranked among the top 5, could do such a thing. They were truly shocked by what they had just witnessed. Su Yu didn't even look at them as he strode into the mysterious Dao Palace. Although the purple-robed and red-robed elders were shocked, as members of the mysterious Dao Palace, how could they allow someone else to enter as he pleased? Stop right there. No matter who you are, the mysterious Dao Palace is not a place for you to act recklessly. If you take another step forward, you will have to bear the consequences. The purple-robed elder's robes fluttered as he spoke. Su Yu did not seem to hear him, and he took 10 steps forward. The purple-robed elder's face was filled with anger. "Then don't blame me for being merciless." His mysterious path energy surged like a rainbow, piercing through the heavens and earth. Su Yu did not even look at him. He raised his finger and shot out a mysterious path master energy that was as thick as a giant dragon. Boom! With a deafening roar, the 2 mysterious path energy collided. The purple-robed elder's mysterious path energy was obviously weaker, and it was crushed by Su Yu's mysterious path energy. The giant dragon's momentum did not diminish, and it swept towards the purple-robed elder. The purple-robed elder was shocked. How is this possible? How can your mysterious path energy be so thick? He was extremely suspicious that Su Yu's true age was only 150 years old. Otherwise, as an old monster who had cultivated for half an era, his mysterious path energy could not even compare to that of a young human who was only 150 years old. However, he did not have much time to think, and he immediately displayed his own domain. Suddenly, a strange scene of heavy black shadows appeared behind him. That was his domain, which could pull the enemy's soul into the scene, causing the enemy to lose their soul. It could be said that this domain was quite troublesome. However, Su Yu's eyes were calm and tranquil, and a giant eye silently appeared behind him. In that eye, swirling ripples kept colliding. The giant eye lightly glanced at the purple-robed elder's domain, and the black shadows in his domain shrieked and turned into black smoke, completely evaporating. Puff! The purple-robed elder, whose mind was connected, suddenly spat out a large mouthful of blood, and his face was filled with horror. Soul domain. Could a person control two great supreme domain at the same time? The answer was yes. However, such an existence should never appear in the outer realm. At least, it should only appear in places like the 8-star civilizations. The giant eye continued to stare at the purple-robed elder, and the soul in his body suddenly rumbled with pain, as if it was being cut alive. With a miserable howl, the purple-robed elder's eyes rolled back, and he fainted. From the beginning to the end of the fight, only 10 breaths had passed. However, a dignified hall member of the mysterious Path Palace was seriously injured and fainted just like that. Su Yu's gaze turned to the red-robed elder, and he said calmly, "Do you want to give it a try?" Chapter 2460. Su Yu did not speak. He had already lost the right to say such words when the mysterious Dao Hall's disciple had ambushed him while he was absorbing the Dao fire. He stepped forward and officially stepped into the Xian Dao Palace. Pushing open the doors of the Xian Dao Palace, an ancient pagoda came into view. Under the ancient pagoda, a white-robed old man sat cross-legged with his eyes closed. His demeanor was calm, and his body was surrounded by a transcendent concept. When Su Yu came in, the white-robed elder slowly opened his eyes. His gaze was vast, as if he had experienced many vicissitudes of life. "This old man is Zhou Yinshan. Who are you looking for?" The white-robed old man had an ethereal temperament. He was not as overbearing as the purple-red and red-robed old men. Su Yu looked at the fate thread in his hand and shook his head lightly. "The person I'm looking for isn't you." As he spoke, he walked deeper into the Xian Dao Palace. The white-robed old man didn't stop him. Instead, he smiled faintly and said, "How can I be impolite when the successor of ancient god Jiolong is here? Let's accompany the successor of the ancient god to tour the Xian Dao Palace." Su Yu glanced at him for a moment, then walked into the depths of the mysterious Dao Palace along the line of fate as if nothing had happened. Around the ancient pagoda was a series of emerald green mountain ranges. The seemingly ordinary mountain range was actually filled with heavenly treasures that were worth hundreds of millions of Dao coins in the outside world. However, in the Xian Dao Palace, they were like weeds that no one cared about. As far as the eye could see, there was a small palace on each of the 180 green mountains. Most of them had already been destroyed, and only a few still emitted life fluctuations. This scene was exactly the same as the Ecliptic Palace that Su Yu had gone to. Most of the hall members had already perished in the dust of history. Only a few hall members were still alive. Dao Masters are hard to find, but Xian Dao Masters are even harder. Xian Dao Palace hasn't produced a new Xian Dao Master for half an era. The white-robed old man sighed softly. Su Yu noticed that there were many young creatures in the corners of every green mountain. Their cultivation was quite astonishing, and there was no lack of heaven-tier cultivators among them, and there were even young creatures in the Great Paragon tier. If these people all went to the outside world, the so-called geniuses of the 4 domains might not even be worth mentioning in front of them. How similar was this scene to the Ecliptic Temple that day? The disciples nurtured by the various civilizations could not compare to the disciples nurtured by the Ecliptic Palace at all. Suyu suddenly realized that the core of the entire outer region had always been the mysterious Dao Palace. In front of the Xian Dao Palace, all the other factions were insignificant. However, no matter how important it was, since it had become Su Yu's enemy, it would not be tolerated. Su Yu looked at the direction in which the line of fate in his hand was spreading. He followed it and looked at the highest peak surrounded by 180 great mountains. Who lives there? Su Yu asked. The white-robed old man said calmly, Our Hall Master. Mysterious Dao Palace Hall Master? Su Yu's pupils contracted slightly. Was it the mysterious Dao Palace's palace master who had attacked him? But since he was already here, there was no reason for him to leave. Very well, the person I'm looking for is also him. Su Yu said calmly. The Star River flowed under his feet, and he instantly arrived at the top of the majestic peak. The white-robed old man smiled and did not follow. There was also a small palace on the majestic peak, and the thread of fate in Su Yu's hand extended towards it. I found it. Su Yu's gaze was ice-cold as he stepped into the palace. However, a formation suddenly appeared outside of the palace, blocking Su Yu's way. At the same time, a golden bell in the palace suddenly rang loudly, as if it was warning the people inside that someone was trying to force their way in. All of a sudden, 3 people walked out of the palace quickly. One of them was an old man with an extremely weathered face. His face was full of wrinkles, as if he was on the verge of death. However, his eyes were exceptionally sharp, and one look at him would cause people's hearts to palpitate. The other 2 were middle-aged. One of them was tall and burly, and his mysterious path energy was extremely vigorous, almost on par with Su Yu. The other one looked honest, and his cultivation was also at the level of the mysterious path master. His aura was obviously weaker than the other middle-aged man. Su Yu's gaze was focused on the honest middle-aged man. He was at the other end of the line of fate. We finally meet. Su Yu stared at him, his eyes cold. The middle-aged man pointed at himself with a puzzled look. Are you talking about me? If Su Yu hadn't tightly grasped the line of fate between the 2 of them, he would have been deceived by his expression. What do you think? Su Yu said calmly. Without another word, the mysterious path master energy in his body surged like a volcano erupting. An intense murderous intent rushed out of his eyes without concealing it. Everything has a price, and you are no exception. Su Yu had never seen this person before, and he didn't know how he had offended him, so much so that he didn't hesitate to launch a sneak attack and destroy him in the path fire. However, he knew how to resolve this matter. That was to erase this person from the world, so as to avoid future trouble. How dare you? The extremely old man scolded coldly. An invisible aura that could topple the mountains and overturn the seas blocked the formation's attack. The whole mysterious path palace roared. His voice reverberated throughout the 180 green mountains, lingering for a long time. Following that, streams of Xian Dao Master's aura shot into the sky from the 30 mountains and converged toward this place. Before long, 30 mysterious path masters of different races gathered in front of the grand peak. They looked at Su Yu in surprise, not understanding the situation in front of them. The old man looked at Su Yu and said coldly, How many years has it been? How dare a living being act violently in front of the main peak of the mysterious path palace? Men, take him down. Yes, Deputy Palace Master. This old man wasn't the palace master of the mysterious path palace, but he had great power. As soon as he gave the order, the 30 mysterious path masters obeyed. Human, the mysterious path palace is seeking death by acting violently. Surrender now, and you may still have a chance to live. An old man with a red nose stood with his hands clasped behind his back and released his aura. The other mysterious path masters also attacked. They didn't underestimate Su Yu because of his young age. Instead, they were very cautious. How could someone who could pass the ancient tower and reach this place be a simple person? Su Yu was not afraid of the many mysterious path masters of the mysterious path palace. He laughed coldly and said, Acting violently? Then ask this disciple of your mysterious Dao Palace what he did to me. He took advantage of the moment when I was absorbing the path fire and breaking through to the Pathmaster level to plot against me. We have no enmity between us, and we have never even met, yet he attacked me so cruelly. I'm only here to make him pay for this blood debt. Hearing this, the many mysterious Pathmasters were stunned. That's not right. The young man in front of them had already reached the level of a mysterious Pathmaster. Since he absorbed the path fire, he must have broken through to the yellow Pathmaster level. How many years ago was that? Rather than using the word acting violently on me, why don't you use it on him? So you pointed at the seemingly simple and honest man. Of course, if the mysterious Path Palace doesn't want to confuse right and wrong, I can accept the word acting violently. The many mysterious Path Masters slowly stopped. They were all old monsters who had lived for thousands of generations, and they cherished their own feathers the most. How could they bear the bad reputation of helping the wicked? Before the truth was clear, they wouldn't make a move. Chapter 2461. The latter's face was filled with fear as he waved his hand. Deputy Palace Master, I don't know what's going on either. He came looking for me out of the blue and accused me of plotting against him. I don't understand. His expression of being wronged and innocent was perfect. If not for Suyu's confidence, his own judgment would have been shaken. You don't understand? Then I'll make you understand. Suyu said coldly as a giant moon appeared behind him. Destiny Domain. Hiss. He has mastered one of the 8 great supreme domains, the Destiny Domain. Under the illumination of the moon, the thread of destiny in Suyu's hand was originally visible only to him, but now was exposed to everyone. That thread of fate was dark red, and it was completely different from normal. Some of the Xiandao masters who knew a little about the destiny law said, "This is a thread of destiny that has a history of life and death." In an instant, they believed Suyu's words. If it wasn't for a life and death enmity, why would Suyu barge into the Xiandao Palace to look for him? The Deputy Palace Master looked at Yining coldly. What do you say? Plop. Yining knelt on the ground, tears welling up in his eyes. He said honestly, Deputy Palace Master, I swear to the heavens that I really didn't. If I did anything to plot against him, I'll die a horrible death immediately. At the level of a Pathmaster, oaths made would often be verified by the heavenly law. Once they violated it, it would definitely come true. Therefore, Pathmasters would never swear to the heavens unless they had no other choice. Even if they did swear, it was a real oath. If it was a fake oath, they would be punished by the heavens. If it was a fake oath, it would be even more so for the Xiandao Master's oath. After Yining swore his oath, a wolf vaguely appeared in the unseen world, accepting the oath. Then, it quickly dispersed, and there was no punishment. His oath is real. One of the Pathmasters had a strange look in his eyes. If it was a fake oath, he would have died a horrible death just now. However, because of this, the Xiandao Masters heaved a sigh of relief. It seemed like Yining had not done anything to humiliate the Xiandao Palace. The Deputy Palace Master looked at Suyu coldly. I admire you for being able to control the Destiny Domain, but this is not a reason for you to be so daring. Rage was brewing in his eyes. The mysterious Dao Palace has been established for 10,000 years, and we have always viewed protecting the world as our own responsibility. When the world changes, the mysterious Dao Palace takes action. Who would have thought that there would actually be evil people knocking on our doors, doing the same thing as the evil people complaining first? The Vice Palace Master's hair and beard were all standing on end, his anger surging. Everyone understood. The vengeance of the threads of fate could not be faked. Since Yining had not tried to kill Suyu, it was obvious that Suyu had wanted to kill Yining. In the end, it was clear that it was Suyu who wanted to kill Yining. However, Suyu had turned the tables on him and framed Yining. As they thought of this, the group of Xiandao masters looked at Suyu in an unfriendly manner. Suyu did not speak, coldly staring at Yining. He was the only one who could sense the deep mockery in Yining's heart. Although he looked simple and honest, he was laughing heartily in his heart, mocking Suyu for overestimating himself. He did not explain further because he also did not understand how Yining had deceived the heavenly Tao with a false oath. The only thing he could do was to carry out his ideas. Kill Ing and eliminate the threat. Since you all think that I am an evil person, I will admit it. Suyu looked at Ing calmly. Do you think that you have one? You are wrong. You have only made me more determined to kill you. Not only was he sinister, but he was also so cunning. How could he dare to leave such an enemy in the outside world? The Deputy Palace Master's face was gloomy. Unrepentant. Kill him. The 30 Xian Dao Masters no longer hesitated. They believed that Su Yu was the true evil person, so they attacked without mercy. When 30 Xian Dao Masters attacked together, how terrifying would that be? Even the power of a single region would not be able to withstand their combined attack. However, Su Yu laughed. Fine, I will test the limits of the Xian Dao Palace. Time domain, space domain open. An hourglass and a galaxy appeared behind him at the same time. The two merged to form a painting that enveloped the entire mountain peak. The time and space domains fused together to form a magnificent image that engulfed the 30 Xian Dao Masters. In an instant, all of the Xian Dao Masters were thrown into a state of chaos. The attacks they launched were either prematurely launched, delayed, or misplaced, injuring their own people. Suyu was clearly standing in the same place, not moving an inch. However, the 30 Xian Dao Masters could not do anything to him. Life domain. While they were still in shock, Suyu activated another domain. A majestic ancient tree stood between the sky and the earth. Threads emerged from the ancient tree, binding the 30 or so Xian Dao Masters and suspending them under the tree. Their life force was flowing toward the ancient tree of life at a speed visible to the naked eye. Although they struggled to break free, more than half of their life force had been taken away. Some of the already old Xian Dao Masters had more than half of their life force sucked away. They immediately fainted and fell to the ground, unable to move or fight. Creation domain. While they were still in shock, Suyu activated the 8 Great Supreme Being domain again. The giant creation hand brushed past all of the Xian Dao Masters. The domains that they had cultivated for their entire lives were now devoid of color. It was a sign that the domains were regressing. No! Many of the Xian Dao Masters roared in pain. Improving one's domain was a slow and difficult process. It took millions of years for one to achieve a slight improvement. However, Suyu's creation domain caused the domains to degrade, making their countless years of hard work go up in smoke. You scoundrel must die. Kill. Suyu's actions completely infuriated the Xian Dao Masters. However, Suyu's heart did not waver. All he felt was indifference. Die, die, die. Domain. A stone tablet with the word die appeared behind him. Around the stone tablet was a dead world filled with mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Boom! The stone tablet flew out, carrying with it the will of death to suppress all enemies. Once they were suppressed, they would definitely die. More than 30 Xian Dao Masters fought against a young man who was only 150 years old. Not only did they not gain the upper hand, but they were also forced into a dead end. No one would believe such a scene if it was told to others. However, the truth was right in front of them. The Deputy Palace Master's pupils constricted as he was overwhelmed with shock. If he remembered correctly, the human in front of him had already used the 7 Great Supreme Being domains. How was this possible? As Xian Dao Masters, they understood how difficult it was to break through the Supreme Being domains. The current heavenly law would not allow anyone to absorb the flames of the Supreme Being domains. However, the human in front of them had mastered the 7 Great Supreme Being domains. Looking at the 30 Xian Dao Masters being suppressed, how could he, as the Deputy Palace Master, just stand by and watch? Evil scoundrel, you haven't even grown your wings yet you still dare to do evil. The Deputy Palace Master broke through the formation and charged toward Suyu. Although Suyu's 7 Great Supreme Being domains were shocking, it was fortunate that he had just mastered them not long ago. He was confident that he could handle it. Chapter 2462. He was completely disappointed in the Xian Dao Palace. Any reasonable person would understand why Su Yu would attack the mysterious Tao Palace and make the entire Heavenly Law Palace his enemy if there was no enmity between them. It was one thing for a normal Xian Dao master to not understand, but did the Vice Hall master not understand the crux of the matter? Furthermore, if they didn't agree with him, they would either capture or kill him on the spot. He could not distinguish right from wrong and only knew how to protect his own people. Was there a need for Su Yu to be polite? Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you have learned a few domains. You are still too inexperienced. The Deputy Palace Master's domain was majestic, and his Path Master's power was far above Su Yu's. When he attacked, the weather changed, and all living beings in the surroundings were suppressed. Su Yu's sleeves fluttered in the wind, while his silver hair danced in the wind. Under the overwhelming might of the Deputy Palace Master, Su Yu was like a firefly, about to be destroyed in the night at any time. However, right now he was not afraid at all. "Old man!" Su Yu's left eye emitted a piercingly cold light, and he extended his right hand. "Cauldron, come!" Roar! 9 sky-shaking dragon roars pierced through the sky above the mystic Tao Palace. A small, ancient cauldron appeared in his palm, spinning in the air. Divine 9-dragon cauldron, suppress the heavens and suppress the earth. The divine 9-dragon cauldron flew in front of Su Yu's chest and floated in the air, emitting waves of dragon roars. As for Su Yu, he put his palms together and rotated his fingers like a wheel. In the blink of an eye, countless runes flew out. The divine 9-dragon cauldron responded and left. It turned into a 10,000 zhong long giant and fell from the sky. Divine 9-dragon cauldron. He's ancient god 9-dragon's successor. How could that be? Why would the successor of ancient god 9-dragon appear in outer space? The Xian Dao masters were all shocked. Ancient god 9-dragon was a forbidden name. They had never thought that his successor would appear in front of them. However, they finally understood why this human was so powerful, able to suppress all of Xian Dao Lord's power alone and not be at a disadvantage. The Deputy Palace Master's eyelids twitched violently, and his heart trembled violently. The successor of ancient god Jiolong. No wonder he could break through to Xian Dao Lord at such a young age. His strength was so terrifying. He regretted that he had been too rash and arbitrary. But the arrow was already on the bowstring, and it had to be released. As the divine 9-dragon cauldron pressed down, he could only try to knock it away. 10,000 laws converge. The Deputy Temple Master's domain soared into the sky, and the 10,000 law domain, which was formed by the fusion of laws, shot up into the sky like a sharp arrow and directly collided with the divine 9-dragon cauldron. Bang! Many divine lights collided and swept through the myriad realms. The heavens trembled, and all living beings prostrated themselves. Inside the Xian Dao Palace, the 180 mountains of various sizes were filled with the chimes of bells. The powerful energy fluctuations forced more than 30 profound Dao masters to retreat frantically. Their eyes were filled with fear as they stared at the scene of the divine 9-dragon cauldron and the 10,000 laws domain in a deadlock. This is the true power of Su Yu's Xian Dao master. Domain is only one of them. The might of the divine 9-dragon cauldron is 10 times stronger than domain. He's actually this powerful. The Vice Hall master's heart trembled, as expected of the successor of ancient god Jiolong. Even though he had just become a Dao Lord, he was still able to fight to a draw with him. A trace of humiliation lingered in his heart. He had cultivated for tens of thousands of years, yet he had been overtaken by a new talent of the human race. However, it was still too early for him to think of this. The sky is without a master, and the earth is without a king. Heaven and earth are overturned, shaking all directions. So you weave signs for the second time. The divine 9-dragon cauldron suddenly shot out beams of colorful light as the 8 dragons released their respective domains. The 8 domains descended at the same time. The 8 domains of the paragons of heaven and earth formed a seal that encompassed everything in the great 1,000 worlds and crashed down. The Vice Palace Master's 10,000 spell domain was finally defeated and was quickly destroyed. The Vice Palace Master roared unwillingly. I'm the Vice Palace Master of the mysterious Tao Palace. I represent the glory of the mysterious Tao Palace. How dare you? Clang, the divine nine-dragon cauldron, and the 8 great domains crashed down, suppressing the Deputy Temple Master on the spot. The Deputy Hall Master resisted fiercely, attacking the divine nine-dragon cauldron from the inside. Protruding palms appeared one after another. However, no matter how he struggled, he was unable to break free from the divine nine-dragon cauldron suppression. Dong! Suyu floated down and stepped on the divine nine-dragon cauldron. The divine cauldron shook violently, and dragon roars reverberated within the divine cauldron, causing the Deputy Hall Master to cover his ears and roar. At this point, the Vice Palace Master was completely suppressed. The world became clear, and only Suyu stood at the peak of the majestic mountain. Who else? Suyu's cold eyes scanned the surroundings. The mysterious Tao Palace had gathered all the heroes of the world, but at this moment, no one made a sound. They were all intimidated by Suyu's unparalleled divine might. It looks like there's no one left. Suyu's cold eyes turned to look at Yining, who was behind the seal. He calmly said, I said that no one can save you. After saying this, he jumped down from the divine nine-dragon cauldron and walked towards the seal. Yining's honest face was finally replaced by true fear. With every step Suyu took, he took a step back. Even the Deputy Hall Master was no match for him. So who else could stop him? His mistake was that he had overestimated the mysterious Tao Palace and underestimated Suyu. Suyu came in front of the formation, slowly raising his finger and tapping it. Crack! Yining's last line of defense was finally destroyed. The last line of defense in his heart was completely shattered. Wait, I have something to say. However, Suyu did not give him a chance to speak. The river of stars beneath his feet was like a waterfall, piercing through Yining's body. From the inside out, Yining's body disintegrated into tiny space dust, finally scattering with a bang. He could not have been more dead. With a single thought, the space domain had killed a mysterious Tao Master. So he let out a light breath. With a wave of his hand, a hidden space storage device flew out from the space dust. It was Yining's space storage device. It was hidden so well that even path masters of the same realm could not see through it. So he looked into it and frowned. He had found a lot of information about Qin Xiener. Most of the information came from the intelligence department of the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce. Most of the information stated that Qin Xiener was regarded as the most beautiful woman in the West region. And one of the top secret pieces of information stated that Qin Xiener was likely the successor of the ancient god Jiuyo. There was no information in the world that the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce could not find. The South Pole Immortal One thought that he had sealed off the news, but he did not know that the Star Alliance Chamber of Commerce had already found out about this secret, and that Yining had found out about it. So, his reason for plotting against Su Yu was justifiable. He wanted to monopolize Qin Xiener. Qin Xiener was the most beautiful woman in the West region and the successor of the ancient god Jiuyo. Who would not want such a woman? And the information showed that Qin Xiener was loyal to Su Yu and would rather die than regret it. So, Yining wanted to kill Su Yu. The cause and effect were clear, but Su Yu felt that it was not so simple. Su Yu's decision to go to the Forbidden Forest had been sudden, and no one had known about it beforehand. How did Yining know? Was there a powerful person guiding him? All of a sudden, Su Yu realized something and shouted softly, "Destiny Domain!" A bright and resplendent moon appeared, illuminating the world. Under the illumination of the light of fate, Su Yu's pupils shrank. The thread of fate between him and Yining had not been severed. He was already dead, and his life should be severed. How could a person's fate remain even after death? That's not right. Su Yu was shocked. He realized that the other end of the thread of fate was not connected to Yining, but to someone standing behind Yining. Looking along the thread of fate, Su Yu's eyes narrowed. Who are you? Chapter 2463. The group of Pathmasters followed his gaze, and saw that the person Su Yu was referring to was the burly middle-aged man. He and Ning were both the deputy palace master's disciples and had been training with him for a long time. Many puzzled gazes looked back and forth between Su Yu and the disciple. Did Zhao Tianlin offend Su Yu too? I think Su Yu is here to cause trouble. After killing Ning, he found an excuse to target Zhao Tianlin. Su Yu is too much. Does he think he could do whatever he wants just because he's the successor of the ancient god, Jialong? If the palace master hadn't been away for so many years, he wouldn't have been able to cause trouble. Su Yu's attitude of causing trouble again caused everyone's collective dissatisfaction. However, they soon realized that something was amiss. Facing Su Yu's questioning, Zhao Tianlin was not nervous or uneasy. Instead, he gave a strange, evil smile. Given the power Su Yu had just displayed, how could a normal person behave like this? With a strange laugh, Zhao Tianlin walked towards Su Yu with his hands behind his back. Amidst the strange laughter, his skin rapidly faded like a golden cicada. With a rustling sound, a whole piece of human skin fell from his body. A complete stranger was revealed. He was tall and slender, with a feminine face and a faint smile. The group of path masters was stunned. They did not recognize the feminine man in front of them. However, Su Yu's pupils constricted bit by bit, his expression grave. Others might not know him, but how could she not know who the person in front of her was? Prince Xiaoyao, Su Yu said slowly. Why am I not surprised at all? How could he forget the news he had heard a few years ago? It was said that an extremely powerful being had barged into the outside world. He had destroyed a 5-star civilization with a single kick. Su Yu was well aware of who that person was. Now that Ning was targeting him, someone must have instigated him. He was not surprised that the last person to appear was Prince Xiaoyao. The end of the thread of fate that Su Yu held tightly in his hand was connected to Prince Xiaoyao. Little bastard, it's good that you were mentally prepared. Prince Xiaoyao's feminine face was filled with ruthlessness. How much energy had he wasted to hunt down Su Yu? How much time had he wasted? For you, I did not hesitate to lure you out. Emperor Xiaoyao sneered. An overbearing force surged out from his body. That power was still profound Tao energy. However, the depth of it was far greater than the Vice Palace Masters, almost reaching Xian Dao Master's limit. Before him, the entire profound Dao Hall seemed so insignificant that it wasn't even worth mentioning. The Xian Dao sect leaders' hearts trembled as they retreated in fear. Even the deputy temple master, who was being suppressed by the divine nine-dragon cauldron, felt the terrifying pressure outside. He immediately stopped struggling and kept quiet out of fear. The disciples in the mystic Dao Hall fell silent too. They did not even dare to breathe heavily under the undefeatable pressure. The entire world seemed to have fallen into a still time and space. Only Su Yu's expression remained the same, and he calmly said, "Don't flatter yourself. How did you lure me out? Was it a trap to test my strength? After all, he's someone I've killed once, so of course I have to be careful." The first clone of Prince Xiaoyao had put it nicely. If he really wanted to attack Su Yu directly, why would he go through so much trouble to get Ning to attack him while he bided his time? It was obvious that he was afraid of Su Yu activating his holy mortal body again. Hence, he had been observing in secret. The Xian Dao sect leaders' hearts skipped a beat as they listened. From what Su Yu had said, it seemed like he had killed Prince Xiaoyao before. That was the Saint Mountain's emperor. Wait, could he be a holy mortal body? Someone finally came to a realization. Only a holy mortal body can kill a Saint Mountain's emperor. This human has a holy mortal body. The Pathmasters all gasped. The shock in their hearts was no less than when they learned that the effeminate man in front of them was the clone of the Saint Mountain's emperor. The effeminate man's mocking expression faded a little. His already gloomy eyes narrowed, looking even more sinister. "Little bastard, you think too highly of yourself. Do you think I'm afraid of you?" The aura on his body grew stronger and stronger, as if he was about to explode. So he was not afraid at all. He said coldly, "Is that so? Holy mortal body, activate." Hearing these words, Prince Xiaoyao's expression changed abruptly. He retracted the mysterious path energy that he had released and formed a defensive barrier. At the same time, he took out his doctrine artifact and hurriedly activated it, surrounding his body as a defense. Not only that, but his figure also retreated until he was out of the Xian Dao Palace. He stared at Su Yu warily, his expression extremely grave. However, Su Yu merely shouted and did not do anything else. He stared at him with a contemptuous look. "Look at how scared you are." Only then did Prince Xiaoyao realize that he had been fooled. His face turned green and then red. His series of actions showed that he was extremely afraid of Su Yu's holy mortal body. "You're dead." Prince Xiaoyao was furious. How could a dignified Saint Mountain's emperor be so scared? However, Prince Xiaoyao also deduced that Su Yu really did not have the ability to activate the holy mortal body. If that was the case, why would he be afraid of Su Yu? Heaven and Earth Palm. Prince Xiaoyao chose to attack. He raised his right hand and waved it toward the sky. The whole sky darkened instantly. A blood-red moon rose slowly and appeared behind Prince Xiaoyao. That was his realm, the Heaven and Earth Palm. Under the illumination of the blood-red moon, everything in the world melted into blood. The 30 Path Masters who had fled far away were no exception. They resisted desperately, but the bodies of the Path Masters were still melting. Miserable groans and cries of pain echoed in the sky above the Xian Dao Palace. The 180 ancient green mountains melted like snow in the spring. "Destroy them all," Prince Xiaoyao yelled angrily. His power alone could suppress the entire outer region. His ferocious power was unparalleled. Su Yu's body kept emitting green smoke under the bloodlight. His eyes shone coldly. He opened his palm, and the 8 great realms appeared behind him at the same time. The 8 great realms weaved together to form a picture of a vast galaxy with thousands of waves. The picture burst forth with 8-colored divine light, illuminating the world and fighting against the blood-red moonlight. 8 great realms, myriad Dao. Su Yu clawed at the sky. Suddenly, the picture of the 8 great realms merged and rose up into the sky like a galloping galaxy. With a rumbling sound, the 2 realms collided and intertwined. Chi! Chi! The blood-red moonlight was extraordinary and close to the level of the Yuan realm. However, the overlapping of the 8 great realms was not easy to deal with. The galaxy instantly broke through the blockade of the blood-red moonlight and engulfed it. Crack! With a series of cracking sounds, the blood-red moonlight disappeared at a speed visible to the naked eye. Prince Xiaoyao frowned. "You are just an ant. You have cultivated a little bit, but this is the end." He stretched out 2 fingers and snapped them.